I know, he keeps me busy. I can sit here. I told Mike, thanks for calling me for supper. Hey, Mark. How you doing, okay? Pick a thing with a, Hey, sir, how are you? Good, how are you? How you doing, buddy? Good. I know. I see you on Facebook, right? And I remember, I don't remember what year it was, but I remember I spoke up for you when you wanted to. See, the job was that was my first year. I got elected in 12, won 8 of 13, started here. Now, who took? See, buddy. Huh? Yeah, that's why they put me down here.
We'll call the Tuesday, March 2nd, 2021, Kent County Levy Court committee meetings to order. And prior to the meeting, we'll have the county administrator explain the WebEx portion of the meeting.
Thank you, President Pepper. As this meeting is being conducted at 555 Bay Road in Dover in the Levy Court chambers, we also have invited the public to join us virtually via WebEx platform, and we published the WebEx web link as well as the call-in line numbers and access codes on the agenda for tonight's meeting, as well as on the county website. And just for the public's benefit, this is an official proceeding of the Levy Court. It is a committee meeting, which will be followed by a workshop for the FY22 proposed budget. And as such, the meeting will follow all adopted rules of procedure for conduct of committee meetings that have been adopted by Levy Court. And of course, we also follow the Mason's Rules of Order. If you are following us on the phone line or on WebEx, either on the video or the phone line of WebEx, we ask that you keep your device muted until such time as you're offered an opportunity to speak. With WebEx, the codes are a little different than what we've been using previously. To raise your electronic hand, it's *3, and to mute or unmute yourself, it is *6. And we'll repeat that different periods throughout the meeting just to remind everyone at those times when we open for public comment. Mr. President, back to you.
Thank you. It appears though we have 7 commissioners here and the county administrator. First item on the agenda is Mr. Angel. Turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Quayla?
Thank you, Commissioner Angel, commissioners. At the request of, I think it was leadership, and Mike Pedamage, apparently got a reputation for writing policies here. I did try to address in policy 4-2 an issue which was brought to someone's attention about lengthy building closings. And if you take a look at number 5, the proposed language would address that. And at least what has been drafted here is that if a building needs to be closed for, or operation suspended for 5 consecutive working days, then it would be incumbent upon the Levy Court president or any 2 members to call a special meeting of the Levy Court to review the circumstances of that closing and then to consider procedures, processes to resume normal operations. So I believe that addresses the primary goal of the revision, but while we were taking a look at that, we recognize that there's a couple of other things that are listed in there which no longer happen anymore, or honestly never have happened. One of them is in paragraph 4, just above it. To my knowledge, the county administrator has never closed the building for a non-emergency or non-weather related reason, and he is authorized to do that up in number 1. This section, number 4, has always been exercised by the president of Levy Court, and so it really clarifies that. If you look in number B, section B, what's related to how to disseminate information regarding building closings, obviously it's a very old policy. As you can tell, I think it was written in 1990 originally. And I believe in practice before that, it had a slew of radio stations that were contacted. They haven't been contacted for quite some time now, so it really is just not a practice. It goes on the website and we use the automatic notification, which most employees, and I imagine most of the commissioners, enjoy each time there is a weather incident. And likewise, paragraph 3 in that section also is related to those radio station notifications. So that's my summary. Back to you, Chairman Angel.
Any questions for Mr. Quayla? Mr. Quayla, just, I know it says notifications, but I know when I go to my answering machine where I have paid for my own phone for the county, there's always a message about using your own time up or whatever. There's a bulletin that goes out for all employees, is what I'm trying to say. Is that still going to continue then?
Yes, so we'll continue to use, I think now it's called, is it First Call or 911? Swift 911. It keeps changing names.
It's Swift 911.
Swift 911 is the name of it now. And that's where they automatically dial you. You can get a text message, you can get a phone call. So that's a system that the county administrator operates each time there's a need for that. So it's actually become very intuitive for him now, where before he had to go through a lengthy process trying to communicate the dispatchers who actually sent that information out. So I hope folks have liked it.
Any, Mr. Buxton?
I assume, maybe not, that I prompted this discussion tonight for the express purpose of simply requiring somewhere that, in the unlikely event, hopefully, that a COVID situation is presented to us again in the future, that there shall be a meeting of the commissioners within 72 hours. That's a non-weather related emergency. So that's what I'm looking to carve out of the situation, with the full expectation and hope that we never have to deal with it again. But if we do, the weather one obviously has never been a concern. Don't necessarily think that it will be a concern. So that's what I'm asking for. That's what I'm asking for is consideration. Something in the language that separates weather from other, and to identify other as a 72-hour window, which I would assume is not unrealistic given the technology that we've now created. So we're in committee. I'd look for some discussion. Or am I out here on my own? And if I am, I guess we can move on. Is there anyone else that agrees?
Commissioner Hall, Commissioner Sweeney.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Buxton. I don't think that's a bad idea to insert that language in here. You know, if it's non-weather related, it certainly would be an extraordinary circumstance, and I think it would be worth, 72 hours is a good amount of time to, have an initial reaction to it, but then draw us in and give us information, and let us, at least be aware of what's going on. So.
Thanks, sir. I would say no later than 72 hours because, usually it's really, lots of things happen in the first 24 hours. So as soon as possible after the event would be great, but definitely within 72 hours.
Commissioner Massa?
I concur with Commissioner Buxton. I think it's a good thing to do.
I want to slightly argue against what I've just argued for, meaning I believe in leadership and I believe in the county administrator's ability to be free and nimble in the immediate response. So 24 hours, I don't need a convening of a commissioners. I would argue 48. I would suggest 72 is fair. I know that our last one was 12 days, and that was far too long for me. It was uncharted water, so I have no issues with going back and arguing or complaining about that, but moving forward in the event. So I would caution against an immediate involvement. I think that's why you have leadership. That's clearly why you have a director. Needs to be nimble and free from worry about making sure. So I think 72 for me is reasonable, fair. Again, so that's where I am. I don't know how that language looks. I don't know if it's 72 hours. I don't know if it's 3 days, So that's where the discussion is for me right now. I'm looking for some guidance. And again, if you want 24, say it, but I just argued why. Maybe I wouldn't. Okay?
Any other commissioners?
Question here, Commissioner Angel.
Mr. Petimage.
As it's drafted right now, the trigger would be 5 consecutive working days, and that would trigger the requirement for a meeting. We need to change the language, so make sure we get it right. Are we saying that for any closure more than 3 days, or exceeds 72 hours, then we call a special meeting? Is that the intent there, or just make sure we get the language right?
When I walked in here, that's what I would have been satisfied. If there's others that have a different opinion, feel free to speak, but I would be satisfied with that.
Okay.
I would be satisfied with excluding weather if that's possible.
Yeah.
And again, the idea is not to have a protracted meeting. Of course we would if there was some kind of catastrophic situation that we just didn't know about. Again, the idea isn't to, it wasn't in that emergency session that we were able to call on Friday, an attempt to have commissioners take over control and make decisions. It was just really to feel connected when I was communicating with others.
Okay.
So yes.
Alan, do you have any questions? I think right now we have 5 days, which would be 120 hours. We need to change it, and I would suggest we 3 days in parentheses, 72 hours.
So I just wanted to be sure. So say some situation occurred at 12 noon on one day, say Friday, which necessitated the building to be closed. That would mean that you would want the levy court to meet by Monday at noon. I mean, 72 hours is a pretty definitive time frame. That's why I tried to draft it as working days. That's something, where citizens are impacted because the building obviously is closed.
Question becomes for me, if we have literally, outside of a weather issue, shut down this building, whether it's a Friday, whether it's a Monday, if we're going on what will likely be longer than 3 days, I got to believe you're working on a Saturday and a Sunday, that you're throwing down stuff. And again, our meeting isn't to help stop the train, make the train keep going. It's an informative one. I get what you're saying, Alan, about 12 o'clock means that it's 72 hours, means it's 12 o'clock the next one. Now, I'm looking for guidance there on how to language that. Yes.
One suggestion might be that closure that exceeds 72 hours, that triggers the call for a special meeting. Instead of the meeting has to be within 72 hours of closure. If we say, after 72 hours, the president or two members call a special meeting. And we have to call everyone, make sure everyone can, we can get a quorum, But I think it's immediate, as soon as 72 hours hits, as soon as we can get a quorum together, we have a special meeting, something to that effect.
And so I'm okay with that, yeah.
We don't need a quorum for just information.
You don't need a quorum for just information,
Right.
But for a special meeting, you need a quorum.
Right. For a special meeting, you need a quorum in order to make decisions from that meeting.
Any meeting, quote unquote, meeting is a quorum. So, yeah.
So, and I'm reluctant to bring this up, but we had an issue here that Sam talked about at the retreat with the gas in the basement, the gas leak. If that had turned into something more serious and what Mr. Buxton's asking for had come into play, where we sent all the employees home and they were going to be home for more than 72 hours because of this, how would what Mr. Buxton's asking for have come into play? I mean, it's not a decision. I mean, that's a decision that you, the directors, and our leadership decide, send them home, let's figure out what to do from here. But how would you have notified the rest of the commissioners?
Like we normally do. We would, obviously, if we did any kind of closure, you'd get notified.
Just notified?
You would get notified right away, just like weather events or anything else, as soon as we could get you a notice. And then as far as the special meeting goes, we would, if it goes 72 hours or more, if we change this up, there'd be a call for a special meeting. If this building was shut down, we'd meet somewhere else, like 911 center or the rec center or somewhere else. But, and I think, there may be some need to make decisions from Levy Court as well. Like when we, with the tornado, we had a special meeting on a Monday, and you all appropriated money that night.
Right.
We wouldn't have been able to do that if we didn't have a quorum. But,
So, Mr. Buxton, is that kind of what you're looking for, a meeting to be able to make decisions about?
The meeting does not have restrictions. It doesn't have a specific intent other than to connect us as a group to what the heck is going on. Does that mean that we have to make a decision now? Does it mean that we can? Yes. I just feel like it's, in this world that we're in, and using the experience of last spring, that it's useful. What I don't want to do is wag the tail the wrong direction, right? So I think that I don't want to overcook it. I think that you've articulated that 3 days, let's put the language in. I think 5 extends it a little further than what I was looking for. I do not, what I need to make sure this doesn't do, when an emergency happens, when when we need to be, leadership needs to be able to react and right the ship. And that needs to be free from worrying about everybody. You just got to right the ship. But once that ship's righted, we're managing a crisis, I want to be brought in. And so I think 72 hours triggers an emergency meeting, somehow reflected in the language says as soon as possible or within 24, whatever. That's fair. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Fair enough?
So if I tried to write the provision fairly broadly, as you could tell. So while I know 72 hours seems very reasonable, absolutely, and certainly would for this building, it was written also to apply if you close the rec center down for 72 hours, or the library for 72 hours, or the public safety building for 22 hours, or I guess technically the wastewater treatment plant. Those would be our major facilities. So as long as you recognize that could prompt the call for a special meeting, no matter what that reason may be.
The wastewater treatment facility is closed down
Yes,
for
you'll probably
greater than
consider that.
72 hours, and I think we ought to be called in.
Yes.
Fair enough? If the Parks and Rec Center is closed for more than 72, and we have to waste a meeting and say, see, I warned you, I'll just say, okay, you got me.
Okay, just want to make sure you're aware.
I got you.
Any further discussion?
I don't have any problem with the changes at all.
I just have one for our lawyer, Mr. Eliason. If for chance something would happen and the commissioners couldn't get together to make a decision, virtually we can do it now. Can it be a combined meeting? So that could go out to have a discussion and make any decisions like we're doing now? Is there any laws that we won't run afoul with?
Well, I mean, there is a modification of FOIA that's in place. I wonder if at some point that's going to be eliminated. So that's something we have to keep our eyes on. But beyond that, so long as you have a quorum, you can take action.
Is there any, for emergency purposes, any notice that has to be given other than emergency?
Well, FOIA talks about naming the nature of the emergency on the emergency notice. You can't just say emergency meeting. You have to sort of offer a brief explanation on there in terms of why the 7 days can't be met, which shouldn't be too difficult under these circumstances.
Okay, just want to have that discussion so everybody's on the same page. I think everybody's okay with that. Okay. Move it forward to the business meeting.
As long as we've articulated. All right, sure.
7 up. Mr. Pettermaj. Thank you, Mr. Quayle.
We'll make the amendments to it that we discussed, and we'll schedule it for next week's business meeting under new business, okay? Okay, very good. Thank you.
The homeless. Is Mr. Enyo in the, he is here, okay. Well, we'll start with the homeless. As you know, we don't have a funding system to help the homeless here in Dover, in the county. We've been trying to work with the city of Dover for a while, and we started Code Purple, which now Enyo is now running it through the Maranatha Church, Code Purple, Kent County, and keeps coming up. For example, there was a family of 5 this past month, beginning of the month, when it was deadly cold. Bob Hartley from Mainstay Motels picked him up off with his vehicle, took him to his hotel, and he called me. So I put him up for 11 days in the motel because there was 3 kids, 2, 4, and 6, and the 6-year-old was autistic. So having learned from the past, you want to help people, and they were very well wanting to be helped. I called Enyo to see if there was any money left, and he said there wasn't. He'd already used his for vouchers for putting people in motels. but there needs to be some kind of function to help. The state, I'm going to be having a meeting with the governor, Rita Landgraf, Becky Martin, and hopefully Senator Pardee this coming week, or as soon as possible, and trying to find out how we can help out in situations that things that fall through the crack. Now, long story short, Bob, Mr. Hartley, hired the gentleman to do some work around the motel for him to help him out. Because of my foot, I broke my foot 4 years ago, and I can't do too much yard work, so I needed some yard work, so I hired him to do some yard work for me to help him out, as well as taking care of him and getting them food and putting out a thing on Facebook, and they got a lot of food and clothes to help out. Well, on the 11th day, he reverted back and OD'd. And his 3 children were there, and his wife was there, common law wife. And paramedics and police showed up, and they brought him back. Took him to the hospital, and he was released at 2 a.m. in the morning, back to his motel. Because of the situation, he was asked to leave the motel, and they put him in another motel. So I called 211, talked to Donna White, told her the situation. She found funding till Tuesday, give him 4.5 more days. So, but I'm talking about families now with kids. Adults can take care of themselves. It's the kids I was looking after more than anything else. And I know not everybody sees the same thing I see, but we got to find some way of making this work. I know North and South have got motels, or they have a motel north, they have little police barracks in Sussex. We don't have anything in Kent County other than 2 shelters, I believe. It's the church and one of the and Code Purple's church. They have a place for women and children. Women and men now? Okay. And the reason I asked Mr. Enyo to come is because even though I had to take a step back in the Code Purple, and Miss Martin cannot be here, and because she's got a reaction to the COVID shot, as a former Code Purple director and I co-founder with her, I wanted to make sure the person that's actually working in our area could actually bring some insight to us and maybe give us some of the things that he sees that I haven't been able to, and open our eyes a little bit to find some funding to get it out there. One of the things I'm going to ask the governor, he has a family council, is to put money from the state and maybe from us in a special funding that could be tapped in on emergency purposes when you call that emergency line after hours. So anyway, Mr. Enyo, can you come down and please tell us what you see, what you feel, what we think we need, just to open our eyes a little bit from the things that has changed in the time I've been working with it.
Hello, thank you for having me. How's everyone doing? Hello. I brought Sue and Teresa back here with me. I asked them to come. They helped me a lot at the shelter. So
Talking to the mic, Daniel, please. I can't hear you.
I'm sorry. So I brought Teresa and Sue with me. They helped me a lot at Code Purple at the men and women's site. And so with Code Purple, being involved with the homeless community, leading it this last year has been very eye-opening. And during COVID has definitely changed the environment for people who are in need, whether you're homeless or low income. And so our city council is working with Interfaith, who has the 801 house. They have a women's shelter, and they have Interfaith, which right now the city council is in, with the Dover partnership, is in a problem because they need to move the men's shelter. So that's the city council is heavily working on that because that could be a men's shelter that houses around 30 men that could disappear within the next year if they don't find a new property. So let alone set aside the people, because that's a state program that they get referrals from the state. We need something in Kent County that solves the issues, the cracks in the system. So like Alan was saying, there is a problem with people who are in between, people who come from out of state, people who are exiting domestic violence situations, people who are victim of human trafficking, drug overdoses or abuses where they get kicked out of a house or a hotel. And so there's really nothing other than Code Purple in Kent County that really answers that. So we have a site at Maranatha that we operate, and we have paid rent. We pay rent to the churches. This year, we have spent over $120,000. In the last year, we spent over $120,000 in rent or helping them upgrade their building. to be able to get the building to have showers and bathrooms and laundry. And that's something that Code Purple, Becky Martin had told me that when they ran Code Purple, they ran it on an $8,000 budget usually. But if God didn't provide the grants or the help or the community help, I wasn't going to be able to open. But Maranatha and People's Church both had very strict requirements of things they wanted to upgrade their facility to be able to withstand not only the population, but also COVID-19. So, without really knowing how I was going to be able to respond, I just said, you know what, we're going to find the money and we're going to make it happen. And thanks to God, we've been able to do that. Now, set aside, we also feed around 180 people a day in hotels, people who come to our office on a weekly basis, and then the emergency shelter. Our emergency shelter for women and children is open from 5 p.m. to 8 a.m. So in a situation like that family that was had a child who's autistic, they would have to normally exit their emergency shelter at 8 a.m. And it's a very tough situation with a mother with kids, especially if you're dealing with a parent who's addicted to drugs, because their focus that day is going to find drugs. And so we are trying to fix that problem. We have a counselor who comes twice a week. We do have the Community Partnership Support Unit from Department of Health coming in and trying to help out, the Bridge Clinic. But a lot of services are halted because, number one, we're open from 5 p.m. to 8 a.m. I already had to come up with a lot of resources to make that happen. And I don't have the space nor the land or the buildings to have a day center. And I have talked to some people who have offered a small space that could be for, minimal price of maybe $1,000 a month for a building that could be open in the daytime, but it's not large enough to hold the 80 to 120 transient people you have walking around Dover homeless with kids, adults, both walking around Dover. And Dover and Kent County probably has around 400 or so homeless, but around 120 I would say are out walking. The rest are either staying with family. You don't see them because they're in tents. They're using their last penny to be at a hotel, or they're panhandling, and so they're able to afford it here and there. But we have about 120 people a day in our county that really have nowhere to go. And they show up, and where were we? Because we end our emergency shelter on March 31st. So on March 31st, there will be 120 people who normally could come to our doors and get food, get services, get help. But after March 31st, that emergency aspect stops. Partly because, number one, the finances is something that we have to consider. Number two, the space. Right now, we do use churches to run this program. And partially that's because of city laws. We want to make sure that if we don't have a building that's very large like this one with sprinklers, then we have to use a nonprofit such as a church to be able to kind of do what we do without having to go through all the loopholes. If it's not a church, then we'd have to go through a lot more loopholes like Wilmington did, where they bought a $19 million hotel. So we don't have $19 million, nor there's not even a building like that in our area that we could even overtake that easily. So it's about, I see some things in other cities like Houston or Los Angeles where they have a big parking lot and they put small, not tiny homes, but they're almost like tiny homes. They call them pallets, and they're about $10,000 a piece, and they can have 2 people in them, and they have temporary permits to operate on a temporary basis. And so I feel like we have to find some type of solution where we have people who especially if they're dealing with drugs, they're dealing with alcohol, or they're in between a house. They have 2 weeks before they get to move in, but they're homeless right now. Somewhere for those people to go, because interfaith can only take so many people at their men's site. Their women's site can take less than their men's site can. And so we have nowhere for emergency type situations. And I think in the past, Code Purple was a lot about cold, but COVID-19 has become an emergency. I mean, if you're living with your grandma or your mom or your dad and they are super worried about COVID and you're out on the streets because the way you live your life and they're scared that you might give them COVID, that causes homelessness in that person's life. And then next thing you know, they're going to go back to the streets and try to find some type of respite. And that could be very dangerous for not only for drugs, but also for crime, gang violence. There are a lot of gangs that are targeting our youth right now in very astronomical numbers. And the homeless population, especially the young between the ages of 18 and 23, are a great target because they don't have any hope. They have nowhere to go. You're giving them a quick, easy way to make money. And we would love, we're trying to find the solution. We did start a job program in partnership with the state of Delaware. Right now, we're working on a job program and trying to find answers. But part of that is also create, as I can create as many programs as I want, but I also need the infrastructure. I need space. I need buildings. And so we're working towards that. But, when you have about, 120 people that would automatically need your services, it has to be the right building, the right fit, and the right people behind us, because I can have volunteers and we could create staff, but we also need the community and people in higher positions to also help us navigate something that hasn't been done before. And that's all I got to say. Ask any questions.
Thank you, sir. So, Mr. Manuel, tell me how the hotel motel voucher program works in Kent County.
So we just got the contract for the hotel motel voucher through Delaware Housing. It actually hasn't even been signed by them yet to confirm it, but we did have funds saved, and they advised us we could start. They gave us what the protocols were to do, and they said we could start using the money, and then once we got the contract, we could start submitting for reimbursement. So we started that.
So you had to use Code Purple funding for that.
To start it, yeah. So yeah, we have to spend the money. We have to spend the money.
How much?
To be able to get reimbursed for that.
How much did you have?
We've spent so far since January 7th around $60,000.
$60,000 since January the 7th.
Yes, putting in hotels, not even anything that's permanent, nothing that's going to go towards their future life. It's all been money that's gone to hotels and business people. And yes, around 60,000. Mainstays is one of our greatest partners. We have about 6 or 8 hotels in the community that work with us, knowing the population that we work with, and communicate with us, because it is under the person's name, but they're still, we try to tell them the same rules apply.
Is Code Purple the primary organization in Kent County that works and provides hotel motel vouchers for homeless people that stay in those hotels?
This is the first year that we've done it officially with the Housing Authority. This before, I think the Housing Authority did it themselves, and maybe they worked with other organizations that maybe like Catholic Charities. But this is the first year they've worked with us officially.
But Catholic Charities has done it in the past.
Yes.
Are there any others?
Catholic Charities, not that I know of offhand.
So this year, Catholic Charities and Code Purple.
Yeah, I don't know what Catholic Charities has on their end. They may have gotten something else, but I know that we're doing part of the budget, because there was more money to be spent on the hotel vouchers that Delaware Housing Authority had.
Right. So I get the emergency situation this year because most of the churches said because of COVID, we can't house homeless people in our churches, and then the cost that goes along with having to clean afterwards and desanitize everything. I understand that. So we're in a bad situation this year. But if COVID is diminished by next year, will we have gotten through that part and churches are going to come back?
I can't give you that certainty. I know I have People's Church and Maranatha that I work with now that help me with help me. I can't, there's no certainty that the other churches that were on board before will come back on.
Right, but most of them are Christians, so I would think that they're going to come back, because one of them was my church, and I did work Code Purple nights at my church.
It depends, because some of the way they say it is, a lot of their church members are older and they're just worried. It would depend on the rate of, the death rate and the spread rate, how that's going when that time comes.
Okay, so then my question goes to Ms. Kiefer. 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, we voted to move $391,000 back to Delaware State Housing Authority for a hotel motel voucher program from the county. $60,000 from Code Purple is only 1/5 of that.
And we'll be able to spend, it's up to about 100. I think I can share the information.
I'm talking about $400,000.
We're allocated $104,000, but we don't have the budget to spend $104,000 right now. So we spent the most that we could. Then we're waiting on the contract to finalize. We'll submit all the reimbursement paperwork and then restart spending the money.
So I'm missing something. If we gave $400,000 back to the Delaware State Housing Authority to use for hotel motel voucher programs in Kent County, and that money is only going to you for $104,000 and probably even less to Catholic Charities, where's the rest of that money that we gave back to the state that we said we couldn't use because we can't put a program together to do that? So
Depends.
That money
might have gone to hotels. They might use it on administrative costs, but yeah, it's something. I think keeping it as close as you can to you is really important.
No, where were you 3 weeks ago? It would have been helpful.
Issue there that you've got to outlay the money. You got to put the money out.
We do have to put the money up front
so
to be able to use it.
If you had $150,000 to put out, then they'd reimburse you the $150,000. You only had $60,000 to put out.
Yeah, right now. Mm-hmm. And then and we haven't even got the signed paperwork back yet, so we can't even submit anything until we get it. back. Hopefully we'll get it in like 2 weeks, they said.
Or other creative things, maybe. So, anyway.
Mr. Masson, you had a question? No. Okay. To Anyo's credit, though, before he took over from Code Purple, to just give you an idea, when it first started, our state portion of what we got from the federal funds was about $550,000 for our county, out of about millions. So it comes out of the TANF portion, and what I learned from that is the biggest population gets the biggest portion, because that's where most of the population's at. But I also learned that we didn't have enough people in our state, as well as trying to help out, to squeak that wheel enough to get the money to come to us. So I think that's what Enyo's trying to do now. He's trying to squeak that wheel to get more money here to help out. So that's where we need to get in touch with our senators.
So why not our senators? We had $400,000 here, Alan, that we could have used for his program right now. And you knew about that when it went 3 weeks ago, having problems. So I mean, I knew that my church had backed out of Code Purple, and I knew that there were families out on the street still because there's no place for them to go. But we gave up $400,000 because we felt we couldn't. Just out of curiosity, Mr. Pettidemange, $400,000 that we gave back that was Delaware State Housing Authority money, could we have done anything with that would have helped out Mr. Emanuel tonight, other than Delaware State Housing Hotel Motel voucher programs?
That was federal money,
right?
That was allocated to us through the State Housing Authority, and I'm not 100% familiar with how it can be used for this particular problem, but I would venture to guess, perhaps Ms. Kiefer could answer, that it wouldn't immediately be available. You could not make it immediately available to a program, I don't believe. Sarah, do you want to address this question?
So Ennio, on a few weeks ago, a month or half ago, I shared with you on social media the pods that came out of Denmark. Those pods were self-sustaining.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Those are the pods you're talking about at $10,000 a piece?
Those are even more futuristic, because those could be opened by anyone at any park. But actually, if you look it up, it's called pallets. They're called pallets, P-A-L-L-E-T. And they just built, in Los Angeles, they just took over a parking lot and built them, and they got temporary permits. And so I know I'm really close with some of the people who opened up the Hope Center there in Newcastle County, and they are going to be probably ordering some right in March. They should be getting a delivery, so they're going to test it out. And so I called the pallet company myself, and they're working out a deal, because they usually want, for them to bring one to you, you have to order 6 at a time, and I just wanted one, because I figured if we have one in front of the office to start the conversation, it would be great. So they're going to let me know if they can bring one with the shipment that they have for up in Wilmington. But those, like the ones you were saying from Denmark, or the pallets, those are a very cheaper option that are also very portable, because we can also, with Sue Harris and her nonprofit that I'm on the board for called Port of Hope, they've created tiny homes that are made out of wood that can be built by students at Polytech, because I'm talking to students at Polytech and at Cesar Rodney also. They also have programs where they can build them. And so if we can create some of the funding, those students with the blueprints, so that everything's nice and legal, they could build them. And I know Chesapeake Utilities just built like a little fake village, and I saw that in the paper. And so that's what sprouted me to call Polytech, because I was like, well, if you're building fake homes, might as well build small, real ones. And so so Polytech is working with me right now. Josh Zimmerman and Betty Torbert at Polytech are working with me to see how Polytech, what they would need, how much can they do labor-wise with our budget to make them. So if I could find a parking lot, a property that could be used to do transition, where people, because also it's just you need space. Even people from the state, the counselors, the social workers, the caseworkers, they're not coming out like normal because of COVID, because they're doing everything online. You have to make an appointment by phone, and those are just hindrances. Yes, you might have 40% of the homeless population that can grab a phone or has the mental capacity to do the whole process it is for their life, but the other 60%, they need help. And even some of the guys you see panhandling, like we have tried to work with some of those guys, but they need a place that they can go to that's away from other people and away from distractions, in a focused type of setting, in a small home or in a small pallet type of home, in a parking lot that's also able to have security with a fence. And we have one entrance, one exit, so we know everyone that's going in and out, and metal detectors and things of that nature. And I think that's it's like a conversation that's a little tough to have, but that's where we need to go, because if not, this population is going to keep growing.
Right.
It's going to keep
Tiny
growing.
homes is a huge issue, because not only do people not want it in their backyard, but it has to be in a location that's easily accessible to infrastructure.
Yes.
Which means in the city of Dover, and city of Dover is already, they're not looking to put that type of subdivision in the city of Dover. So do you mind stepping aside and let Ms. Kiefer come up to the podium, please? Thanks. So, Ms. Kiefer, Mr. Manuel has mentioned a couple things that he thinks might be able to help, whether that's pods or pallets or money for Polytech to buy the materials to make small homes that can be moved around. Would that money that we gave back to Delaware State Housing Authority been able to be used for that type of purchase?
Mr. Petitmage is correct. There's no way we could have just immediately turned it over. We would have had to create our own competitive program, the same way the state does.
So
It would
what's
just be
competitive
administered by
program?
us.
One person assigned to this? It's not a whole group of people. I mean, it's one person that's assigned to, what do you mean by competitive
You've got
program?
to create the program with the parameters to create the criteria for administering the grant, for actually what the competitive criteria are, what sorts of organizations are eligible to apply, the same way you would for any federal grant. And then you have to administer it.
Okay, so if we have done that, would those funds have been able to use for pods, pallets, or
They would certainly be
tiny
able-
houses at Polytech?
Presumably, because the state would have had to sign off on all of our criteria as well.
So given the discussion that we had 3 weeks ago on February 16th, are we now looking into creating a program next year so we do not give any money back to State Housing Authority?
That funding was specific to the CARES Act and specific to COVID. It was not a long-term solution to the unhoused.
So that money's gone and it won't come back.
Well, let's hope COVID doesn't require it to be used again. I would suggest that if we want to have, because what we've been talking about is emergency shelter.
Right,
But
that's the
homelessness is a much
CDBG, that's the
bigger problem.
CDBG CV1 money was a 391, but we also voted to give the 260,000 back. That is continual as far as the federal government's concerned.
But it was specific, it was pulled out specifically for COVID relief. It was not pulled out to address homelessness. It was pulled out to deal with COVID.
So what can the State Housing Authority do with it that we couldn't, and why isn't Mr. Manuel the beneficiary of that?
They have, because they're both state agencies, they have an immediate relationship with the state service centers, can turn the money over to them. They administer the hotel motel vouchers.
I'm missing something. I mean, he's saying he only got $100,000 worth of vouchers when we turned back over nearly $660,000 worth for vouchers
Because
in Kent County.
The state service centers also administer vouchers.
Okay, so how do we advocate for the homeless in Kent County to make sure that they're doing that? Because it doesn't sound like they're doing that if we've got that many families still walking around the street. How do we do that, Mr. Manuel? I'm curious.
Commissioner Hall?
Thanks, Commissioner Angel. I think, I'm convinced that we need to address this. I don't think we can fully address this tonight, but I believe that at least I'm convinced that we need to pursue it. I would say that maybe this is worth half of an FTE or an FTE to look at various pots of money that are available, coordinate that, come up with a program and run a program so that we can direct money, because I believe that it's a chronic problem. It's not going to be solved. It needs to be managed, and that the county has a role in doing that. So I would just like to say that, maybe we could get consensus that would be worth investing in, from a county level, rather than relying on the state or the city. There's so much more of the county that, the city is just not going to solve, address this for. So I think we have a role in that. So, I get a sense that we're starting to come up with solutions tonight, and maybe what we need to do is, come up with a commitment to create a program, resource it, and move it forward.
Commissioner Masson?
Commissioner Hall, I agree with you 100% that we can't kick this can down the road any longer. Somebody has to take responsibility for it. But to Commissioner Sweeney's question about the State Service Center, the town of Smyrna used to have a Code Purple Center at Centennial Church that I had set up when I was mayor. However, the church has opted to get out of that program even prior to COVID becoming an issue last March. But I do know the State Service Center does give out vouchers because the small motel there south of Smyrna has been completely rehabbed and is now open. And since I go by there every day, I know that that facility there is completely housed because there is no parking left. And those people there, I understand, are strictly through the State Service Center. So I think that's where a lot of the money's going. I don't begin to know how many people that are homeless in Smyrna, but I do know we do have a homeless population. But I think once the police can work with the individuals to get them off the street, that is where they're going there, south of town, right across from Food Lion.
Mr. Buckland?
Brief. We've had the conversation. We had it, in fact, a couple weeks ago. We had Mr. Miles in. We had the conversation. I talked with Mr. Petitdimage, in fact, Ennio. It's complicated because it's nice now, I think, and probably one of the reasons why is because of the conversations behind the scenes holding up the money originally for the express purpose of trying to make sure the money stays here and to help folks like yourself. And now I'm glad to see that they maybe are. But yeah, it's a little complicated because you have to manage the money, and there are strict requirements and strict regulations that go along with, as you can appreciate, the issuing of the money. And then you have to front it first, so maybe that's a problem that needs to be addressed. But I spoke quite some time with the director of the Housing Authority, I believe, someone who represented themselves well. And they were articulating the need and the use for the money and how helpful it is, and the fact that it will, and that was her words, that it shall be spent in Kent County. The money that we're returning has to be spent in Kent County. I don't know how that's verified, but that was what sold me, in conjunction with the recognition that our community development block grant program was struggling. Forget the excess money in dealing with homeless. It was struggling to actually get money out. We had excess funds available to actually fix structures and homes. And Mike and Sarah correctly stated that taking on this new program, although worthy, wasn't truly feasible if you really wanted to get the other program back up and running, which also helps not necessarily homeless people, but actually people that are in their homes and we're trying to prevent them from becoming homeless. So it was a double-edged sword. So they sold me on it. It was the best thing we could do. That's why I supported the move, although, Commissioner Sweeney, I respect and appreciate your points because, yeah, it would be nice to have moved it. Alan, I didn't hear you speak on that a week or so ago. That's why I'm concerned now that we're moving in this direction. I'm not sure what that looks like, with that said. So anyway, I'll end with this one, okay? There's an immediate need, and then there's what are we getting to? Using your story. Hotel vouchers doesn't fix that story. That's the problem. That's what I see as the problem. We can all come in with those stories. That doesn't fix it. What is it that we have to, and I don't know about us, but the state, what do they have to do to fix it? But I'm out. I've spoken enough. Commissioner Hall's out there too.
Commissioner Hall, 1 second. On the voucher system, just to give you a quick insight of my 7 and 8 years of working with the homeless at the motels, when they get a voucher from the state, it's $1,200 a year. What happens during the cold season is the homeless get together and they rent a room. It could be 3 or 4 families there for that $1,200 so they can stay there for a long period of time and feed themselves. So they know how to make it work and to a certain point, but then it runs out. And as long as it's not a long, cold spell, the adults, like I said, the adults know how to take care of themselves. It's the women and children that I'm really concerned about, especially the children. That's why I wanted to make sure this got brought back up. And we've been talking about it and believe me, Levy Court's been great. We've given money for the Resource Center, for men's mission. We bought a washer and dryer. We bought racks to help put stuff on for the Code Purple people. I mean, there's things we have done to help out, but we need to go a little bit above and beyond because life is a little bit more than an entity of substance for machinery. So just wanted to put that out there. Commissioner Hall and then Commissioner Pepper and President Pepper.
Thanks, Commissioner Angel. I was just going to recommend, because I think it was maybe 6 months ago, the Housing Alliance Delaware published a report on housing situation, which is related to homelessness in Delaware. And if you read it, I mean, by the time you got done with it, it was just terrible. And so I wonder if we should have the executive director from the Housing Alliance Delaware come in and maybe help us define a role for the county, from their perspective, and then, the information that we're getting tonight is good. And think strategically. I agree that we need to sort of kick it up a notch and come up with a little more structured plan. And they may be able to help us out since they have a statewide perspective. And so I just want to throw that out there.
President Pepper.
Thank you. We're not going to solve this tonight. There's a lot of ifs, ands, and buts that's got to be looked into. What I would suggest is if we create a committee to review this, have our people on it. I think Chief Faulkner, his people should be on it, to Ms. Kiefer, her people, and others, to see what can be done and come back and make recommendations to Levy Court, and then we can proceed from there. But sitting here tonight just kicking things around, we're not going to get anything accomplished tonight. So, the committee can look at where the funds can come from and all that kind of stuff. We're not going to do that tonight sitting here.
The main reason for this was to have a discussion so everybody be on the same page in the same book. And I think that's happening. I really do.
I agree, but to progress it on past here, we need to do something other than what we're doing tonight.
Oh, yeah. So I think, looking forward to the future, we need to kind of look for property or a building that can serve as an emergency shelter, to find the doctors and the workers and the caseworkers and the staff you're going to need for something that run. To get it started, I think we're going to need around $2 million in a foundational investment in this type of project, because you're dealing with human lives, and it's not a rehab, and it's not a hotel, and it's not a shelter. It's emergency type thing where someone's life is literally on the line. And there's 120 now, and if that Housing Alliance report that if you saw, the numbers went from 2019 to 2020, they went up around 20%. So this year, I'm sure it's going to go up even more. Next year, even more for this emergency situation. So I think working together, working with people who like to write grants, who like to lead, who have experience in creating things that are new, because there is going to be new permits and new, programs and ideas to be implemented to make sure that we're not doing anything that's not working. Because, we have DBH, we have a different behavioral programs, we have our shelters, but there's still a lot of people that are not being serviced. And the service centers do hotel vouchers, but they only do it for a certain amount of time. And a lot of times their focus is people with disabilities or people that have some type of something very crazy in their life that's going to qualify for them for that. if they've already been serviced once, because usually service center likes to help people one time, unless there's kids involved, unless there's a disability involved or something else, maybe they have a referral from probation or from the state, gives people a couple extra weeks. But you have people who are not able to, some people, they shouldn't go to hotels. Like they're like that gentleman overdosed. So usually before I or our team approves anyone to go to a hotel, they have to stay at a Code Purple or emergency shelter first for a day or longer, so that we can evaluate their mental state. Because I'm not going to put someone in a hotel and then find out the next day that they're dead because I allowed them to live on their own when I know they couldn't handle it. And so those are things that we need to address and work together on. And we're out here in the trenches doing it. And I didn't expect to be so involved and see it grow, but the need is there. So, we're very committed, and we can, however we can work together, we're here to make it happen. Thank you all for your time.
Any questions for Enyo?
Thank you, man. You do a great job, dude.
Appreciate you.
Thank you, Enyo, for your information. We will be back in contact. Thank you. Okay, on to the second one, site grading. I guess we want Ms. Kiefer for this one too, for grading. The reason I put this on the parking lot was because over the years, certain developments had some water issues for water flooding their basements, crawl spaces, and it all comes down to not proper grading of water away from the house. So that's why I wanted to put it on the parking lot during our retreat, have a discussion about it, because it's been a long time I've been with this and hearing about it, and I inherited a couple developments that are now in my district that, oh my gosh, you should see the water problem. It's all due to grading. So, Ms. Kiefer, can you put some insight to what we can do, please, to do something better?
There are a couple of options. One of the things I heard you say had to do with basements, wet basements, and draining from basements, from sump pumps. Those are two different issues, right? Grading has to do with surface water from storms. What's happening, and we're seeing it more and more, is because the water table is so high. Sump pumps, if you have a sump pump, they're working constantly, and the issue is where they're draining to. So there are a couple of issues, and we're actually scheduled to talk about this on the 16th because we have two ordinances to address basements and their placement in the county. What we're proposing, and we worked with the Conservation District to come up with this, is sort of additional testing and demonstrating that a basement can be placed and where it can be placed so it's above the high water mark, or the high water table. And then where to direct the drainage to reduce the amount of impact on the community. So that's one item. We have two ordinances. They're scheduled to come to committee on the 16th. Jared will be here as well. In terms of just general site grading, where we haven't been getting as many complaints, but it exists as an issue, the county can look at doing lines and grades. And what you would do is require that at building permit, the developer, the builder, provide lines and grades, and then prove that they've actually built to those. So that could be a building code amendment if the Levy Court so chose. Newcastle County does lines and grades. I don't think Sussex does. So those are my suggestions.
Well, I can tell you from the houses I've seen being built with the foundation, and if there's a basement, there's usually plenty of dirt out back. That, and I heard what you're saying, but if they built enough dirt up against the foundation where it would taper the water away coming down off the house during a rainstorm, instead of falling back into the crawl space or down into the foundation, that's the kind of grading I was looking at to try and spell the water. Plus, if they have a stormwater management pond, which they've been fantastic since we started putting them in place, and the best testament is one right here behind, and although it's not a grading problem per se, behind Burger King and Target, that big pond back there It used to flood out Edgehill and the state library and all those shops there. We haven't had a major flood there in years because it now diverts and goes into that pond. And it's gotten to the highest I've ever seen it in the past 2 years. But, I just want to make sure that we can save some of the people's properties and cut down the mold and mildew and some of the issues that I'm seeing and they're talking about, because it all comes together, like I said, site grading. And that's why I wanted to put it on here. Simplistic, it says it sounds, it's not, I understand. But it has to be some way we can get the developers to do it. So, Mr. Buxton.
I think, and it's certainly not just something that I pushed. I think we've all pushed addressing the basement issue. I think you're going to see in our committee some positive steps. I think something that I've learned is that, in fact, some of the builders, especially the reputable ones, agree with the terminology. Jared will be here. I think at that time, if you could add that for discussion.
It's on the agenda.
No, I'm talking about lines and grades specific to what Commissioner Angel just brought up. Just, you don't even have to add it. Just as an informational point, you can certainly talk to them about it.
Sure.
That's what I meant. Yeah, I'm not talking about the basement. I know it's on the agenda. Commissioner. Yeah.
Commissioner Pepper?
Yeah, about 2 years ago, I guess it was now. No, it's been longer than that. 4 years ago, I served on a committee under Executive Order 41 from Governor Markell, and it was DENREC ran the committee, and it was to address climate change and what they believe, and whether you believe it or not. I think that the amount of rain and the frequency of the rain that we've had here in the past few years have caused this problem, and it seems like the rainstorms we have now are not a nice gentle rain with a fraction of an inch. It's inch, 2 inches, 3 inches at a time. And the people that agree that climate change is coming say this is part of it, and what's going to happen, they say, in about 50 years, be after majority of us. Former President Banner probably still be here, but about 50 years, our weather in this location is going to be very similar to what the weather is now in Atlanta. So it's going to be hotter summers and more rain and more frequency of rain. So I think it's wise for us to get on board now to start addressing these problems, because they're not getting any better. My phone is filled up with people with water complaints, and throughout the entire county. So I think we need to address it, and we need to be very proactive. And I know that the Conservation District, I know they're very concerned about it, because they're handling the majority of our complaints, and they want to get something addressed. So I think that on the 16th it'll be a very good meeting, and I look forward to that. So thank you. And but I think it's a problem that's going to continue. It's not going to get any better, and more houses, less places for the water to go, and we need to address it. So I think we're headed in that direction, as we got a meeting set up to do it. So thank you, sir.
Anybody else? Just for point of information, when I was on the Kent Conservation District, when I was first elected, we went to Los Angeles, and Mr. Riley's uncle was second in charge at the Jet Propulsion, and they have all the historical facts for all the space, anything in space, that went to space or the moon or whatever, but they also have monitors that go across the room that average the amount of ice that breaks off at the North Pole, and they can show you how much is lost in time. In a 10-year period, raised the Atlantic Ocean 1 inch. So it is coming. If you really want to find some exciting reading, try the Sea Level Rise booklet that was produced, probably 8-9 years ago. It's going to be underwater, and in the future, if something, or you know, we have a major warm, but we have some issues we have to deal with, and we need to start looking at it at least, whether you believe it or not. Just want to give that a little bit of fact of what I was told and I learned. So, anything else on this issue? Seeing none, go on to the third one. Pool. Over the past 14 years, the constituents have been asking for a water park / pool. It was back in our main, I think 1992, 93, Mr. Pettermaj, the recreation that Mr. Van Sant, I think, did when he was the director there, that a pool was part of the list, and it was added on when I became a commissioner in 2005, but nothing has been able to move forth on it. And I understand, I think staff has a liability issue, I think, on some of that, but a water park we're surrounded on both sides of Delaware, and we have no place really to train our kids unless you can afford to go to the Y or get on a high school team, but you got to learn how to swim because it's a swimming team. But I think it's time we actually start looking at a future for our water park / pool in one of our parks. So I wanted to put it on the docket because this is coming from a lot of constituents that over the years, and I just wanted to bring it up, and we added it to the parking lot on our retreat to get you guys, our commissioners here, take an interest in it, look at it, to see if we're going to move forth and where would it go. President Pepper.
Oh, that's a nice thing to have if you can afford it. I know that water parks, like civic centers, are not a money-making venture. If they were, Kent Swim Club would still be open out on the Dover-Kenton Road. And it's a big expense, and I think we were just talking about trying to do something with the homeless, and now we're talking about doing something with a water park. I think the water park, like I said, would be nice to have, but I just don't think that it is something that, personally, I don't think it's something the Levy Court should put high on the agenda right now. We've got other parks. We've got the recreation building that is busting at the seams, and I would like to see it built onto and expanded for people there. And not only that, but water park takes up a lot of space. If you just go down to Killens Pond and just look at the parking for it alone, I mean, that's a lot of space. That would take up a lot of one of our parks if we put it in an existing park. So I think it would be nice to look into, but I don't think that we're in a position now to spend any money on it right now, and I would doubt if there'd be any grants out there right now for something like that. So I've heard it also that people like to have a water park, but I ask them if they ever go down to Killens Pond, and they say no. So, it's just something nice to talk about, I think. Thank you.
Commissioner Sweeney.
Thanks, Commissioner Angel. A water park or a pool facility is usually only in operation for a few months of the year. And we have another opportunity that I've brought in front of Levy Court 4 times in the past year, and that's the museum. I would much rather move forward on a museum that starts to preserve the heritage of Kent County and something that people can go to all year round, that we can promote Kent County itself, because there's nothing in Kent County that promotes Kent County right now, and we already have the asset for it. So that would be my preference, to start looking at the museum as opposed to a water park.
Okay. Well, then I'm going to throw my 2 cents in because, as I said, the study was done years ago. It was part of it. And we paid for the study, and it was added to the study because of that. As far as the Kent Swim Club, that was a high price dollar for kids to go and swim, and not everybody can afford that. So I'd rather get kids off the street during the hot months and have them go and find a place to cool off, have some fun, get tired out, and sleep. Just to throw in my 2 cents of how I look at it. As far as Kent County, tourism is our biggest bang for our buck right here in Kent County. The state of, our county tourism is doing a fantastic job of getting people here. Since they rebranded, we have more people coming to Kent County now for the historical portion of Kent County. So it's not the same what you're saying, Mr. Sweeney. They're coming here for historical purposes too, and the quaint little villages in our area. From all the way from Smyrna to Viola to Harrington, it is a great process. And I just turned my position over to Miss Maston so that she can be part of it, because it is just a wealth of knowledge, and what they've done and continue to do is amazing. So I see it just a little bit different from that point of spec, but I do understand, I do like history, and I do like museums. So it's all about what you all want to do. It's on the docket because, once again, this was what was brought forth from constituents. I'm bringing it forward to you in a public forum so that we'd have that discussion. Anybody else? Ms. Maston.
A real quick question. I seem to remember when I was sitting out there in the audience that John Pardee made a presentation for a company, I believe, that's looking to do a water park, as well as an RV park, just south of Medding Seafood. Would that water park there, when it's built, be accessible to the public, or is the water park just tied to the RV facility that's going to be built there?
It's my understanding it was supposed to be part of the hotel that's going up. They were going to add a water park. Was my understanding, I thought.
So is that water park still going to go forward? Does anybody know?
I don't know. Mr. Pesmaj?
I don't believe any specific plans have been submitted. I know that was discussed as part of the overall contemplated development of that area. And I'm not sure the current status of it. The rezoning that you're speaking of was not approved, and I'm not sure if that's impaired the overall plan or not.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, we'll move on to the next one, investment policy. This was something that was brought forth many years ago to look at doing something with a committee to get investments into our county and make some money and save some money, as well as give us some direction. So I see Ms. Durham in the back there. I was hoping that she'd be here. Can you give us an insight, Ms. Durham, where we're going, or what's going on? Or I know we have two people that we appointed to a committee. I just want to try to get it revived and see what we can do to make it better for our county.
Commissioner Angel, this is
Mr.
something
Buxton.
that, to your credit or not, you routinely bring up. The question I might ask is maybe some research on other jurisdictions. Are we unique, or is this standard? So maybe that's something you can look into, or Ms. Durham has that information. Is the way the county does it, is it standard practice or unique?
Is it what?
Is the question raised that Commissioner Angel consistently does, that I assume has something to do with the way we invest certain revenues, certain monies? Is that a standard governmental procedure, something that Dover does, something that Newcastle does, or do they do something different? Do you know that?
Our investment policy very much mimics the other counties. It's a very secure, we have very secure investment policy, very conservative. What's happened is right now, in the past few years since the debacle of 2008 with the banks and everything, investments are not our friend without risk, so.
She was saying is that it is standard. So if we were to make a change, we would be outside of the typical protocol for this specific type of money. Whether it's a good idea or not, it would be outside the typical protocol for Newcastle or Sussex County or traditional governments, is what
That is correct.
Ms. Storm said. That's what she said. And then, of course, she said not obvious. It is obvious that we've been benefiting and also harmed by, the low interest rates, I guess. So, I'm not opposed to this or for it. I just was curious what she was going to say there.
Well, like I said, I know years ago we put we put two people on a board, and it was just the Levy Court at that time commissioned the committee to come up with a plan and some rules and regulations, and I just wanted to get it back on the docket to get it moving forth again to see what we could do.
Well, I'm not sure what you want moved forward, so the thing says investment policy. So do you want a policy change?
I'd have to go back and look at what Levy Court said back then, that they appointed I think it's two people to work with you to come up with a plan. I just know it's been a long time, and I'm just trying to bring it back up. I know interest rates are down again, but at the same time, we like to have a policy in place so we can look at doing investments and hopefully make the tax dollars work harder for us and save.
Well, we do have an investment policy in place. We wouldn't be able to operate without an investment policy in place, so we've had that for many, 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 many years, before I ever entered here, 30 years ago, so. And we've tweaked it, but I'm saying we've always had an investment policy, so.
Well, I'm not quite sure then what's going on because, like I said, I know the Levy Court back then put together, and I believe you accepted to take it on, but it's been a while, and I just wanted to bring it back up to see if we can move it forth.
Somebody help me here, what are we moving forward?
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you, Susan, I'm sorry.
I don't understand what we're moving forward. We have an investment policy. Do you want the policy reviewed? I don't understand what you're asking.
I'm asking for the committee to be brought back together and do what was asked to do it at that time frame. That's what I'm asking.
So now, the investment committee.
Correct.
Okay. That's different.
It was also to help develop our investments and take a look at it and whatever else we needed to, so it could advise you on Levy Court. That's what I thought the whole thing was all about too.
I mean, when it was originally set up, the world was different, yes. And we had a lot more opportunity to see if we wanted to branch out differently. And it doesn't, that's fine, so.
I want to see if we can bring it back up and take a look at it. I'll be glad to work with you too on it.
Alrighty.
Any questions on the investment policy for Susan? Seeing none? Thank you, Susan. Back to you, Mr. President.
Mr. Buxton.
Didn't anticipate this, us being this deep into the clock at this particular time. We've got a lot of ground to cover, and none of these sensitive. Although I do think they're important to have a conversation. I guess what I'm stating is, and if we have to, we can move it to another agenda. Hiring people versus paper. The question I'm asking is, and this is no slight on anybody, but is there a hitch in our giddy-up when it comes to hiring? Can we do it? Is there a better way to advertise? Is there a better way to select or to whittle down who gets an interview? Is the test a problem? I know we don't use it right now, but is it a problem when we do use it? My concern is, my impression at times is that we rely heavily on the paper. The highest qualifying individuals by test or by whatever's on it moves to the front. We select those three and then we interview them. And I use the analogy, if that was the case in the combine, Tom Brady would never have been a quarterback in the NFL. So that's what I'm here to discuss with you tonight. Do you even feel as if there's a need to look at it? If you do, what is it that you would like to look at? All right, so let me start with that. Does anyone feel as if maybe, and I've spoken to Mr. Quill, and Mr. Quill, I would appreciate maybe if you can come on down to the mic, sir. I spoke to him, and I said, this is not directed at anything that they're doing wrong. They have standard procedures, and I'm not complaining, I'm asking. You know, we're successful, can we be better? So, Commissioner Sweeney, what's your thoughts?
Thank you, sir. So, having been involved in the hiring practice for the state of Delaware and Wesley College for somewhat like the last 30 years, when you say people versus paper, I'm not sure exactly what you mean. So when you say paper, you're talking about the resume. The resume is what gets you to an interview. And then during the interview, everybody on the interview panel supposedly has met the minimum qualifications for any position that we post out there. So that gives us the legal the legal authority to hire somebody based on their life experience, their job experience, their knowledge, their education, because they've met the minimum qualifications. Once they get into the interview process, that's where you actually can say, I didn't take the first two candidates because they didn't interview well, we picked the third candidate. But I think what you're referring to is, Mr. Quayle, correct me if I'm wrong, we don't have a testing procedures for every position in the county, right?
No, just certain positions.
Just certain positions. So I would suggest that we review those testing procedures that would prevent somebody from getting on the interview panel. But also, we've already taken the steps to expand our candidate list by going to a service such as Indeed. But is there other mechanisms within less expensive means that we could increase the number of candidates who could apply for a job?
So I think this conversation is born out of, I guess, dissatisfaction with the number and perhaps quality of candidates that we have received of late, responding to our applications or our posting or recruiting process. And certainly it's frustrating to the personnel office staff as well, because our efforts, which have been significantly expanded since we completed our diversity study, and what we have done, we've gone from your routine just posting in the newspaper, which gets it onto Monster. We also post on Indeed. We've been doing that a long time. We also mail every open position to 20 or 30 community organizations because we're trying to attract a diverse applicant pool. And we certainly encourage referrals. So that has not been producing, for some reason, much interest. I can tell you from talking to colleagues, it is similar across all jurisdictions in Delaware, so it's just not Kent County. For one reason or another, in this current climate, folks do not seem to be applying for positions in government, I guess, or local government at least. I cannot explain to you why. I know that folks seem to believe that Indeed is the best resource for posting positions, and certainly I may have thought that originally. I can tell you that the 3,000 plus, I guess I'll call them likes, because I don't know what else to call them, in Indeed would tell you that it's not a very efficient method of recruiting. And it's similar, I described, I think, to Commissioner Buxton, to Facebook. So basically, you see some title, like you might see a cat photo, and you just press a button that you like it, and we get thousands, certainly hundreds, but I have thousands of them in a file now of likes from people that we do respond to all of those and ask them to please submit a county application, because you don't really get much information from Indeed. And we did recently spend the $900 to be able to look at search 30 resumes per month on Indeed. I can tell you that so far that effort has not produced. Some were identified, some were very specifically sent the application, asked to fill it out. There has been no response from those candidates as of yet. So maybe we'll get something out of that effort. It just hasn't borne any fruit to date. So that's a process we use. We do need an application in order to help determine their qualifications and quite frankly, their sincere interest in working here. Because as I said, our response rate to our requests for folks who just express interest is very low, well, almost none.
So when we reach out to those candidates and say, please submit an application, what is the process for those people on Indeed to submit an application to the county?
So what we do is we email it to them, and then they email it back. Or they can mail it, or they can drop it off. It's
no ability to do it online?
So we do have on ours, no, we do not have an application format online with the service or anything like that. You can, it's a fillable PDF, and they can email it to us. Our IT folks have actually been working on it quite a bit and had a conversation with them today about trying to make that a better process, an easier process.
So an easier process, is there a chance that we could partner with the state and get into the state's application, online application system, or AppleTracks or something that the state's using?
We can certainly ask for them. I can tell you that they typically are very reluctant. Used to be able, and you probably know this as a former state employee, used to be able to access that HR website the state had very well, and we benefited from that a lot at the time. They've essentially shut everybody out unless you're a state employee.
Yeah.
Because I think people were using their resources, and perhaps their IT folks probably figured that out.
So I get it. In the last year, things have gotten a little tough because people who are getting unemployment have to show the unemployment office that they are applying for jobs on a regular basis to continue to receive their benefits.
Perhaps.
But I've filled 2 positions in the last 6 months. Both positions had 15 applicants. One position, I only had 1 person on paper that qualified. And then the second position, I had 7 that qualified for a lower Tech 1 position. And those people, the person I hired will come in at Tech 1 and gradually go to a Tech 2 to a Tech 3. So is that something we could look at easier, that maybe we hire at the lower levels and train into the more engineering positions or that require more technology instead of trying to hire into the higher positions? Certainly, and one of the things, we have a number of positions that already have these levels, usually 1, 2, and 3. When we post them now, and certainly in the past too, but we may advertise it as the lowest position and make sure to include a notice that if they possess any skills, and certainly any certifications, that they can be brought in at the higher pay rate and at the higher level. They don't even have to start at level 1 if they already have those skill sets, so you can come in at a higher level. But we'll take a person who has less capabilities, less skill sets, less experience. If they apply and have some experience, that would at least indicate they'll be successful in the position. Nothing's worse than hiring somebody and then having to let them go within 6 months. Right. So the people versus paper argument would be that if someone came in and showed some of the skills required for a lower position, And we hired that person when there was an applicant that also had skills for the more advanced position, didn't get the job. They'll have a legal case to say, hey, you didn't even consider me because, why didn't you consider me? And then they'll start looking for that.
Well, certainly the county tries to hire the most qualified individual for all its position. It's all of them. That's what everybody would want, I would hope, that we hire the most qualified. Certainly, if you're going to invest time in training the individual, you want them to stay and be able to do the work, but ultimately, and stay.
Right. Yeah, I get that. I get that. But I have a quote on my wall that says, train people to make them want to be able to leave, but treat them so they want to stay. And I think Levy Court, over the past 12 years I've been here, I've done quite a bit to treat the employees that they'd want to stay. So,
Yes.
Thank you.
I got you. Commissioner Maston?
Mr. Quayle, a question. You're not testing now, but when COVID is hopefully over, will you go back to testing?
So part of the diversity study that I've been discussing, diversity and inclusion study, it did make a recommendation that we have our testing programs evaluated just to make sure that they were not portending any biases. And the tests that we do use have been beta tested and tested for non-discriminatory practices. So it's very important. So we mostly use our tests. We don't use them in all positions. We mostly use them for very entry-level positions, like some wastewater operator positions, some maintenance positions, and we have used them for 911 dispatcher positions in the past. It used to be where we would get 100 applicants for 911 dispatcher, not so many anymore. Paramedics, they aren't really tested. We're looking for someone who has the certifications typically already there. So I don't know that testing has really been a limitation for any positions. It certainly, I think the individuals who have been successful in the test end up getting hired.
The only reason I asked that question is 35 years hiring. We used to test a long time ago, and there was times where, we may have missed an opportunity because you get a person who really doesn't test well, but they really do have the skills and they have the experience to do the job, but the test kind of says, well, I don't think you're an even match. So testing to me is a concern, only from past experience that you could miss an opportunity to get somebody who's really good, really loyal, and is here to stay, and the testing may say, hey, maybe they're kind of a mediocre employee, when in fact they could end up being one of your stars. That's the only concern I have about testing.
The value of testing, I think, is it's certainly the most objective component of the process because everyone has unconscious biases, and a test is not. That's what they're beta tested for. So it is, it's bias-free typically, and it is essentially the fairest component. So if we can achieve that and also still be able to achieve diverse representation from those folks, and I'm sure that we do make sure that occurs when we have a test, and those folks are and then forwarded on to be interviewed. And and similarly, when an interview process occurs, we're very interested in making sure that they're making fair decisions that promote a diverse workforce.
Two statements. First of all, Mr. Pettit-Demage, in reference to F and G, which are on here, don't leave, Mr. Quayle. This is to Mr. Pettit-Demage. If I was to state to you they're under my name, is there the potential to move those two to a timely committee meeting in the future? Is that viable?
Certainly. Yeah, we can do it in 2 weeks.
So, and that doesn't upset, there's no one in the crowd that's shown up specifically to hear that you know of? If they are upset, they better say it now. Okay, so we're going to do that for starters. It's not because they're not important to me, it's because they are important to me, and I don't want to rush through them. But we've got a lot to get to this evening. So I'm going to stay on E, and we're going to finish that one out. and I'm going to speak directly to a couple things, maybe give you my thought on how we can get tangible after this, and then end this one. We've had a lot of conversation about the test. I'll be very specific about the test. I think the test is important. It's important to exclude anybody that's not capable of doing the job. What it should not be is something that identifies who the 3 highest test takers are and then interview them. I think that's where the mistake is made, if in fact that's how it's made. So what I look for, if you have 32 people that apply and the standard base passing number is this, and anyone above it is deemed to be with an intellect capable of performing the task, then you move on to what else you want to determine functions as an interviewing mechanism. It can be done. It's done elsewhere. It's done in your school district, Commissioner Sweeney. It's done in our school districts. It's done in other areas of the state, so we can do it. And I think it would be an improvement. That's what I mean by people versus paper. So what would I suggest? 2 things. Research that if possible, if I may, and maybe look at determine how that looks. I know maybe you're, without overcooking it, take a look at how the other areas are doing it, because they are. I would ask a request. I would suggest in a face-to-face meeting with the other directors that you review how the job gets posted and how it's articulated to an applicant. Is there a better way to reword it? Is there a better way of how it's described, how it's produced? Maybe there isn't. Maybe there is. I can't tell you. Maybe the directors don't agree with me. They can tell you in a 5-minute meeting they don't agree with me and you can end it, right? Or maybe you guys can produce something that works. You know, again, not coming at you. This is not coming at you, Mr. Quayle. I love these guys, that's why. Always impressed with you. You ever notice how each director comes up and is just on point?
I believe that's out. The RFP is going out shortly. So that's something that will completely change. Stormwater maintenance. We have 35 residential districts and we have 1 commercial district. The commercial district has we have 4 commercial districts with 68 units, and the residential has 3,625, and the total budget for revenue expenses is $110,100. Capital projects. The first one up there is the server. I do want to point out on this, though, if you go to page 121 in the book, if you guys remember last year, we kind of changed up the format of this, of the one that I have up here is only for capital projects that we're funding this year, and the ones starting in page 121 is funds that capital projects that we've had ongoing. So we changed it up a little bit, and the funding source is right underneath the capital project. In addition to that, if something is an ongoing fund, for instance, the disaster recovery, it states that it's an ongoing fund, and the $221,900 is actually the available funding that was available at January 31st, not all of the funding that was put into that project the whole entire time. So with that being said, the server hardware software replacement maintenance is an ongoing fund, and the plan is to put $30,000 in there this year. The virtual machine server, again, I believe it's an ongoing, no, the goal for that is $340,000, and we're putting $30,000 in there this year. Department upgrades is we determine every year, we determine what new computers we need, and this year it came up to $63,000. The audiovisual replacement fund, we just got our audiovisual equipment replaced, and this is building the fund back up. The goal is $450,000, and we're putting $15,000 in that. The IT enterprise fund, it's an ongoing fund. We don't really have a goal for that. And we're planning on putting $300,000 in there. The surveillance replacement, let me find that one. We're just starting the fund. The goal is $60,000, and we're starting it this year. I'm sorry, we started it last year with $10,000, and we're going to continue to put $10,000 in each year. The ESRI project, the goal is $106,000, and we were planning on funding that between 22 and 23. Does anybody have any questions on those before I move to the next?
Debbie, if I just want to point out, the number 2 priority that we had over the retreat, the IT Enterprise Solutions Fund. With this proposed budget, you will have over $2 million in that capital project line available for that project if the $300,000 is approved in this budget. So I think that project is well funded and ready to launch from a funding standpoint. Thank you.
So as you see, the total funding for the information technology is $501,000. For community services, as you guys just talked about earlier, the splash pad water amenity, that has been in the budget book for a while. We suggested putting $50,000 in there to talk about it. The goal is $250,000 if we fund it. So the next one is the historic improvement structure. That's an ongoing funding. The current amount of money that we have in there is $49,200, and we're planning on putting $20,000 in there each year. There's no goal set for that. The Hun property, the Walcott Manor Improvement House, that funding is an ongoing funding. We do not have a goal set for that, and the current amount of funding that we have in there is $76,500, and the plan is to put $10,000 in there each year. The Kessler Ring Park development, currently we have $125,000 in that fund. Again, it's an ongoing fund. We do not have a goal set for it. The suggestion was to put $25,000 in fiscal year 2022 and then bump it up to $100,000 each year after that. Parks equipment. Yes.
The Wetlands Bridge project also.
What's that? Oh, sorry. The Wetland Bridge project, in fiscal year 2022, it will be fully funded with $25,000. That goal was $250,200, and that project is underway.
And this project would link the trail system between Brecknock Park and Kesselring Park with a bridge over the Isaacs Branch.
Debbie, I need some coaching here real quick to understand what we're doing. So we are addressing these capital projects early in this conversation. And do we routinely go over each one of these in its detail, which is perfectly fine?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Do we routinely go through the next 4, 5, 6 different pages, each one individually,
Yes.
identifying each one? then the question I ask is, and again, as many as I've been through, I should know this. We're not being asked tonight to say, wait a minute, why are we doing that? I'm not asking if I should do it. I'm not going to tonight. But you're not asking that. You're just informing us.
Right,
Who made the
tonight,
decision to put this, each one of these in here? Did we have a role to play, or did you with the directors have a role to play in deciding that, I can't read all of them. Yeah. Anyway, surveillance camera, I think it says park pavilion, parks equipment, right? You set that up with the director, put it in here, and inform us that it's in here, right?
Right,
Okay.
this is the county administrator's proposed budget, so.
I get it. I just want to make sure that I'm not, anyway, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, so normally I go through each item and then we have the discussion, excuse me, and then the next couple of meetings are to talk about the open items that we have and for you guys to come to a decision on which direction you want to go with the different items. Okay, so the next one is the compact utility trailer. In 2020, we had budgeted $12,500 for that, and we're completing the budget by budgeting another $12,500 for that. A new parks vehicle, we have $32,100 proposed in 2021, and we're having it proposed again in 2022 and 2023. Parks pavilions. Currently, the gold is $100,500. Currently, we have $60,500 in there, and we're proposing $5,000 in 2022 and $5,000 for each out year. Seal coating and restriping. Sorry, I find it. Okay, so there's $105,000 in there. We do not, this fund is going to be ongoing. Our plan is, as things need to be seal coated or restriped, to use the money. So the suggested funding for this year is $10,000.
So Debbie, it's Jody. I have a question concerning, so the $10,000 that we're setting aside, but the one seal coating project we done was, that we wanted scheduled for this year, was fully funded by the two general legislators from that district. So why would we put $10,000 into an account that we're, even the last one we did was fully funded by state legislators? So why are we setting money aside for something that we don't need?
Well, I think we can't guarantee that that'll always
Yeah, I
be
know that.
available, but we can guarantee we always need to maintain our parking lots. So if there is the availability of CTF funding for that, or to pair up with CTF funding, we would be able to do that. The goal here is just to have an ongoing fund to repair when we need to do it. But we won't discount any opportunity to take advantage of CTF.
Absolutely. So the screen here shows what we're putting into it each year, and the total after, what's the balance of that right now?
The balance in there right now is $115,000.
So we have $115,000 sitting as seal coating, and we haven't had to use it for 6 years.
75,000 of that is built up. So it's not all our.
75,000 is dealt up. Well, it's not CTF funds.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, that's just the general category that you have CPF.
I'm confused then. 70, the 100, and how much was it, Debbie? 100 what?
15.
$115,000 was not, we have not contributed $115,000 over the last 5 years or 6 years.
We've done $40,000.
So we've only contributed $40,000 over the last four years at $10,000 a year.
Just let me add something here.
Okay.
It's 105,000 without the FY22 budget.
Okay.
So Debbie's answering with the.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep.
So right now, we've budgeted 30,000 of our funds and
Okay.
It's important. How do you do it? How do you do that? How do you look at 105,000 in a random selection out of nowhere and know that $75,000 of it is DelDOT?
It's in the book.
It's pretty good.
No matter how
It
prepared
wasn't
you,
specific, that was just a random one.
no matter how prepared you think you are, she's always got questions. She always thinks beyond everybody else. So I think that this project might be underway, and that's why it's still showing up. Once the project is complete, that funding will go away for the CTF funding. So I
what,
think we're doing a, Jeremy, is that true? Are
this
we,
isn't a specific park, right?
it's for all the parks, but I think that we're working on a project right now, and so possibly when this gets done, there will only be whatever's left over after completing a project. Right, I was gonna say, Jeremy must be hurting.
Never mind, Jeremy.
Okay. So I believe the question is, state the question one more time. It took me a while to get down here.
What parks are left to do?
Say again?
After Browns Branch, which we just got a commitment from Representatives Morris and Senator
Wilson.
to complete.
Correct.
What seal coating is next? Other than it's just ongoing, so we always have to do it every X number of years.
Yeah, so we'll do an assessment every year to determine which parking lots have deteriorated significantly. This year we chose Browns Branch over like Hun and the Trailhead at Route 13, or Route 10, and Lebanon Landing. But honestly, we may skip over those and do the rec center pretty soon again, because if you go in the rec center, you can see that a lot of the striping has really faded, and it's hard to see the fire lanes and stuff like that. So we make a determination kind of on a year-by-year basis. We set something up originally, but a 7-year plan of one thing every 7 years, like a cycle. And that's why the $10,000 each year. And we've just been fortunate that the legislators have, been able to fund those things for us at this point, but they may not at some point too.
All right, thanks.
Okay, so the next one is surveillance camera. The goal is $93,500. And we currently have $33,500 in there. And the plan is to budget $20,000 for the next 3 years. The next one is the recreation center, the turf field public address system. We started funding that, and there's $25,000 in there, and the goal is $70,000. The plan is to budget $10,000 in fiscal year 2022, $15,000 in 2023, and $20,000 in 2024. Planning, inspection and enforcement, we plan on buying 2 vehicles this year for a total of $48,000. Public safety communications, there's console replacement. We have $255,000 in there, of which, well, the plan is to put $195,000 in there this year, but only $95,000 will be county money, and $100,000 will be state 911 board money. The fabric on the dispatch walls, we currently have $40,000 in there. The goal is $80,000. The plan is to fund $20,000 in 2022 and also in 2023. The cardiac monitors, we have a contract with Zoll, and the contract costs $252,000 each year. I do believe that's correct. So that's, we have it funded up to a certain amount of money, and then this is to continue funding it. The emergency response unit replacement is for a new vehicle for EMS. The cost is $71,000. The public safety headquarters, a building generator replacement. This has been in the budget for a while, and we were hoping to get a grant, but that didn't work out. So the goal is $140,000. We do currently have $50,000 saved, and the goal is to put $30,000 in for the next 3 years. Public safety emergency management, they're getting a vehicle donated to them, and the $13,200 is for the conversion of the vehicle. And the total cost for public safety's capital projects as planned is $581,000. Facilities management, the plan is to build up a fund for the seal coating and restriping. This is the first year for that. It's $28,600. The landscaping, this is the first year for this also, and the total project is $10,000. And the new maintenance building, as you guys discussed, is the goal is $300,000, and we're budgeting $150,000 in 2022 and 2023. The chiller replacement, again, this is a brand new project. The goal is $100,000. We're planning $25,000 for each year. The next one is roof repair for the Kent County Complex building. The goal is also $100,000, and we're planning $25,000 for each year. And replace the flooring at the Kent County Complex. The goal is $250,000, and we're planning $50,000 for the next 5 years. The sheriff's office, the plan is to get a new vehicle. The funding source is the sheriff fees at $24,000. Special grants. The community projects assistance is suggested at $25,000 this year. The excellence in education is $10,000. And new this year is the emergency relief fund brought on by the tropical storm that we had. Downtown Development District, this is an ongoing project. The plan is to put $15,000 in there. Another project is the Edge Matching Grant, which is for $10,000. Economic Development and Land Acquisition is an ongoing fund with $50,000. Economic Development, Strategic Development is an ongoing fund as well at $50,000. And then we have, with special projects, we have a building fund for equipment and vehicles at the county. We normally put, I believe, $30,000 in there each year, but we only put $8,000 in there because we knew we were funding I&E's new vehicles. And then we also put $30,000 in for facilities upgrades and repairs. So that's also an ongoing fund. So our total capital projects is $1,910,000. So the summary of revenue. Oops, sorry. What?
But as I can't read it, but do you recall, last year we Last year, we put a freeze on capital project spending. We did not reinstitute any of those, correct? Some of those things that were chopped off, they've now been added to this budget, but were not implemented in the middle of last year that you recall?
Right, we had a few that we postponed and some that we didn't fund at all last year. And so this year we weren't under the same constraint. We did not. We did cut a lot from the original proposal that we had, and some of the department managers may be looking at some of their numbers and say, hey, wait a minute, that isn't what I thought I was getting. But we did rein it in, but there's nothing that we're planning right now to put in the narrative that says we're freezing until a later decision point. These are, most of the lines you saw there are building funds. Some of them are completing funding for a few projects. But that's, and then of course, things like vehicle replacements and things like that would happen if this budget's approved.
Narrowing down is the fact that last year we made a significant cut to the capital projects budget. That's correct, right? Based on some freezes? And that's what I'm trying, I can't read it, 1.2 or 1.5 million last year?
Almost 1.7 million.
695, yeah.
So last year was 1.7, this year it's going up, but not
1.9.
overwhelmingly, it's going up a couple $100,000. Okay, thanks.
I have the summary of revenue and expenses up here. I don't know if anybody wants to discuss any of those, but the budget is $33,288,500. Of that, you'll see for the revenue, we are taking almost $1.8 million for operating expenses, 1.2 million for capital projects, which is just general fund, and then we have reserve RETT, which is covering $606,000 for capital projects.
Can you pause there, go back down to what you just talked about?
Oh,
that's okay.
Sorry, there we go.
So for me, when we look at that, is there a way to, in the future, highlight those more?
I'm sorry,
I don't
what?
care if you just make one yellow, one green, and one blue, but something so that it stands out a little more for me. It becomes wordy.
Well, on my screen, it is. I don't know why it's not coming out as.
Well, and I'm just talking about the ones that stood out as requiring a conversation. So the reserves transfer general fund for operating expenses. We took 1.7 million and moved it into the out of savings.
Correct.
And
Well,
moved it into
out of fund balance, correct.
right. So it's a significant increase, and it's there because of recreation, or what was it because of?
Why are we short on funding?
Well, just in general, it's a big number. We moved it. Yeah.
Well, there's lots of different reasons.
What's the biggest one?
Well, increase in spending. Actually, that's not true. Our revenue is down significantly because of COVID.
Is down?
It's down.
Okay.
Yes. If we go up to, I'm just going to go up. Right.
We were, at the retreat, we were going to be up significantly, like 1.9 million or something.
That's what I said for how we're going to end the year this year. That's my estimate for ending FY '21.
All right, so we're estimating next year's to be down? Is that what you're doing there?
I mean, there's a switcheroo there. The bottom line of revenue before you get to the transfers and everything, what happens is our fees are down about 400,000 because of the share auction fees and stuff like that. Our realty transfer tax is up,
Yep.
and our property tax will be up. So there's the offset, and then our grants are down some, like, 200,000 or 300,000. Off the top of my head. But anyway, so it ends up balancing out. Overall, what happens is, though, when you go to our total expenses, increase, and with the some proposed PPAs and stuff like that. So.
I'll talk to my commissioners later about it, because I'm sure they get it and I don't, so. Gee, Hal, can I stop by and see you after this meeting?
Maybe tomorrow.
All right.
If I could chime in too, I don't, maybe reiterating part of what Susan just said, but if you look at last year's transfer, and then we add on to that the lost revenue and sheriff's sales and interest income, those were two significant reductions that we believe will carry into at least the early part, at least on the sheriff's side, early part of the FY22 budget. And then the interest rates are forecast to remain pretty low. So the revenue on that side is diminished. On the expense side, if those revenues were what they were last year, this time last year, that number would be a lot smaller, that transfer. It's to balance the revenue versus the expenditures. So you're kind of balancing them on that. Whether or not, we typically don't actually spend that, but it's to balance the two budget, the revenue and the expenses.
So in making some of the decisions we're going to make, well, we're going to look at, not make tonight, but look at, we should take that into consideration, that it's certainly not, we're not flush with cash based on revenue. All right, thanks.
Okay, unless anybody wants to look at the expenses or the revenue some more, I'm going to go back to the slide. Oh. Lordy. I don't know why it's not. Okay, thank you. Okay, so our open items is the amount of money we're going to put in open space preservation, the stormwater management, proposed personal actions, the medical insurance, the pension contribution is on here, although we do not have updated numbers, the OPEB contribution, and COLA for employees and retirees. The first one is the open space preservation is proposing $200,000. We believe that the uncommitted balance is $200,000 at this time. The stormwater, the available balance in there remains at $199,000. We have not put any funding in there since 2017 or 2016.
Could you go, I'm sorry, Debbie, could you go back to the open space?
Yes.
Just want to explain something there. So we're a little past midway in the FY21 budget, right? And we have 200,000 budgeted, and we will be seeing in late May round 25 on the ag land preservation grant program. Consistent with what we did last year, we spent in June of last year on that program buying easement rights or assisting with the state. We spent $200,000, and so that's our budget for the coming round. And what we're proposing is for next year we put 200,000 in again.
So Commissioner Pepper, President Pepper. I believe that the conversation needs to be had with the Conservation District about how the county can better partner with them to assist in the flooding issues, possibly adding another Jared or something like that. So that at some point the question becomes, well, how do you pay for it? New money or reconfiguring? There's two things I see there. I see 100,000 as affected potentially. So there's 100 grand. And asking once again as to what are they doing with that money? Can we repurpose the funds? Are you indicating, Mr. Pettit-Demise, that they did, that they have now started to burn down some of that money? Weren't they at one point in time not utilizing it?
Well, on this particular, I was addressing the open space, but this one here was a fund that we used to maintain on a regular basis for ditch maintenance projects, primarily that the Conservation District would bring forward to us. But that practice has ceased several years ago, and this is an unexpended balance in that fund of just under 200,000.
So if I was to prioritize something that a Kent County initiative, I'd be happy to join you, Commissioner Pepper. It might be to have that conversation to say, what can we do? We have the money here. The need is great. You know better than anybody, being a countywide commissioner. What do we need to do? So anyway, I'm holding up the meeting, but I would put that on you and definitely would love to have that conversation with those folks.
So the proposed personal actions are a programmer 1 in IT, a parks worker 1 in the Parks Department, moving 3 employees from 35 hours a week to 40 hours a week in both the library and in the CDBG program. The reclassification of an administration officer to an assistant division manager in the emergency management division, a new wills clerk, and a new assistant accounting administrator. And then there is a question on the building codes 3, whether we're going to keep the position or move it to contractual. And the last one is emergency medical services. There's 5 additional paramedics. So the program 1 will be a pay grade 12. The estimated salary is $55,100. The benefits, $41,500, and that's including an increase to pension and OPEB. So the total cost would be $99,000. Stop me if anybody wants to talk about any of these. The next one is a Parks Worker 1. Is a pay grade 5, salary $30,100, benefits $33,100, for a total of $63,700. The 3 library staff moving from 35 to 40 hours a week, the salaries would cost $15,900, and the benefits would be $5,400 for a total of $21,300.
Back up to 2 slides.
To which one?
2 slides.
Park.
Yeah. Just want to point out to the commissioners, take a look at that. $30,000 salary, $33,000 in benefits. When I talk about recalculating, that's what I mean. To an entry-level parks worker who's maybe 22 years of age, I don't know. It is what it is. You take a look and see if that interests you. All right, thanks.
This, having the CDBG staff moving from 35 to 40 hours is the salaries would be $18,200. The benefits would be $6,000 for a total of $24,200. Emergency management, the reclassification of the administrative officer from a grade 12 to a grade 14 as an assistant director. The salaries would be $5,000 and the benefits would be $1,700 for $6,700. A wills clerk 1, the salary would be $30,100. Benefits 33,100 for a total of 64,600. Assistant County Administrator, we put this in as a pay grade 15 with a salary of 71,300. The benefits would be 46,800, and the total cost would be $120,500. 5 additional paramedics. The salaries would be $230,000. The benefit would be $193,000 for a total of $448,100. I do want to point out with this, the benefits, the pension and the OPEB is estimated in here. Our pension and OPEB are not going to go up necessarily within the next year or 2 years by these amounts. It's just an estimate of what each position would get. The Building Code Inspector 3 position, it has been, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, keep going.
Okay. The Building Codes Inspector 3 position, it's been funded, but it's been vacant for 2 years. And in this current fiscal year, the funding has been used for contractual inspection fees. The county administrator recommends directing the funding to contractual inspection services for the future. So we would like to know what is Levy Court's position on this position. I'm sorry, what?
If I could just chime in on this one. Under our policy, under our ordinance, when a position's been vacant for beyond 2 years, it goes away unless we decide to, keep it in place, either funded or not funded. This is a position that was vacated, and there was authorization given to backfill it with a Inspector 1 this year, but as the volume of inspection service demand came to be realized in a significant way this spring, or this winter, or last fall, we used the funding to hire some contractual services. And so there were 2 different companies that did some work for the county, and currently we have a relationship with First State Inspection Services. So, and we're using the money that was previously budgeted for the Inspector 3 to pay that. And so the question is, do we want to continue that practice, or do we want to continue to fund the Inspector 3 separately and authorize that to be filled? So I think it's a question that commissioners need to weigh in on and help us decide on that. Thank you.
Gentlemen, lady, if you don't mind, as the commissioner or the chairman of that department, I'll weigh in first. I think it's clear what I think, but I'll reiterate it. That transition, that change has been highly effective, exceptionally effective. The reason that I like the setup the way it is because I like making a recommendation that pays for itself. It's important. When you make a suggestion, you have funding available that can be redirected to pay for it. In doing this, that's what that does. So I would support continuing not to fund that position. If it eventually eliminates the position, we can always revisit that if the need arises. But maintaining the relationship we currently have in a contractual way has been highly effective at dealing with an issue that all of us have dealt with over the last 8-9 months, which is a ballooning effect. Through no fault of the department, it is what it is. COVID has come to us. And moving forward, as we come out and things begin to get manageable again, we can sustain it with the current individuals we have and then utilize the contract when it gets bumped again. I will add to this. In the rating system that you developed through the retreat, what wasn't highly ranked, in fact it tied, was the compensation study. Never been a big fan of that compensation study. In fact, I voted against it at times. But I've always said, if you're going to pay for it, then you better use it. We paid for it. We better use it. Because in there are some positions that are undersalaried. We should bring them up. And that includes some of the individuals in this department. In fact, in the inspections area. So that's my long-winded approach. I will tell you one last thing. That position's been vacant for 2 years. You know what else has been vacant? The CDBG one has been vacant for 2 years. There's an engineering position that's been vacant for 2 years. All of them are contributing or were contributing to an underperforming outcome, right? They were taxing the individuals around them who are working hard every day, but were lacking a player. Still are in sewer, still are in the CDBG. So we need to fix that, but I think we fixed this one. Anyway, I trust that maybe not everyone's agreeing. I'm not going to battle you over this, but I think it's a big mistake if you move away from it. Thanks.
Are we going to
I think you need to
resolve
discuss
this
it
tonight, or are we going to bring this back up under a separate?
I think tonight is a good time to have some dialogue on these while we're fresh. And we also have staff here that can provide some commentary as well if you need to.
Sure. So for the 3 positions that Commissioner Buxton mentioned, I'd be curious to know how long we advertise those versus how long they've been open. And if they're open, in my view, a contractor service is great for a temporary need, but obviously we had a need that created the position in the first place. And so if we believe that there will be years of work, full-time work for that position, then we should have a full-time employee sitting in that spot. So that's just my position on that.
As Mr. Pettimaj pointed out, there is staff here to talk about the positions that they have as proposed actions. I don't know if you want anybody to come up and speak, or you want possibly them to come to the next meeting, or.
I thought you were asking us to talk specifically to that. I thought you were asking me to render a conversation, to have a discussion about that specific inspector position. I didn't know we were going to be talking about the other positions and formulating a position or opinion.
Right, you're right. I specifically suggested it'd be helpful to get Commissioner's direction on that item on contractual versus position. Because again, we took the money that was budgeted and we're paying a contractor with it. The question is, you want to do both, or you're going to add some more money to the budget? Or have we reached a place where it's working for us there? You know, as I said at the beginning, the 3, we authorized it to be filled with a 1, and we didn't achieve that. So, but we did begin to use it for contractual services, and that's where we're at right now.
Well, I think if we're going to talk about that, we need to find out how the contractual services is working out. So Ms. Kiefer's here. She can come forward and give us her opinion on whether that's working or whether she needs a full-time employee to do that.
Thank you. Certainly in the areas of plan review and building inspections, they've been very helpful, and they've helped us catch up, particularly in plan review. The benefit of a position who's available in the office is it can help with the other 2 elements of I&E, which would be the front counter and enforcement. So a position gives us a little bit more flexibility to move somebody around. And a couple of years ago, when We went through a reclassification for that position. We took it from a 13 to a 12 and eliminated the assistant director position, again, to try to right-size the department. The idea was that position would always be a floater and go wherever we need them to go in I&E. So yeah, in those two elements, the contractor has been very, very helpful. In our ideal world, we would probably have the position, have a smaller amount of money allocated for surges, for inspections or plan review for a third party. But ideally, we would have the position. Thank you for asking.
So if you had to choose between one or the other, flat out answer.
The position, I believe. But again, in an ideal world, because particularly in I&E, more than the other pieces of planning services, speed is very much an interest, right? And for us to be able to respond very rapidly. And when we see numbers like we saw in the last year, right, starting last spring, even if we had been fully staffed, we would have struggled to keep up. So then having sort of the safety valve of a third-party contractor, not at the $100,000 level, but giving us some room there would have helped us keep up.
So in order to keep up, you're going to need both.
That's the ideal world. I mean, we're going to provide the service the Levy Court wants us to provide as fast as we possibly can, regardless. But that's the ideal world where I think we can be the most responsive.
Pepper?
Buxton.
I would request that we not tonight, that we have a different conversation a later time. Is that possible, Ms. Kiefer, Mr. Pettit-Dimash? Is that something that requires it?
Well, absolutely not required to decide tonight, but it will be required to be decided. So I think some of the early information is important. While I have the floor, I will say this, that when it was earlier on, before we did the contractual thing, it was decided to try to hire an Inspector 1 level, and we weren't successful in getting that. The thinking there was, it was important, we needed capacity in the field to get inspections done. This was going to be an internal promotion and then backfill an Inspector 1 with a new position, but we couldn't get an Inspector 1 to begin with. So that's why I didn't authorize it to be filled, because all it would have done was, if we couldn't get an Inspector 1 by advertising, why would we think we would promote someone and then get someone? We needed people in the field to do the inspections. That's what I understood the problem, the most pressing need to be. I'm not down there every day, but that was what was being communicated to me, is that, we were behind in inspections. And so we couldn't get an inspector who would be in the field, so we hired a consultant to help us with it. That's kind of a simplistic view of what has happened. So I just wanted to explain that. Thank you.
Commissioner Sweeney.
Thanks, President Pepper. So I have a different view of how that happened, because I thought that the contractual services was for plan review only, not for inspections. Well, you're shaking your head no, and Sarah's shaking her head yes. So has the contractual service that we contracted with done any in the field inspections?
The most recent contract. We've gone through a series of contracts. The first one, and I believe the first extension, were simply plan review, because that's where we were bogged down. The last one with Dave Naples, and then the one we have now, with First State cover both plan review and inspections. Dave Naples never went in the field for us. Our guys got us caught up, and we remain caught up. First State, for field work, we get behind over things like holidays and whatnot, and we bring them in to keep us caught up around then. So they come in periodically to do field work. They're still primarily doing plan review for us, but they're available for field work.
So what's their percentage of doing plan reviews and doing in-field work?
Oh, goodness. Without looking at, I don't have numbers in
Just
front of me,
wag it.
and I'll look it up. 65, 70% plan review?
So 70% plan review, 30% in the field.
Roughly.
So then we could use 30% less. But that was just an emergency situation, though. We're not really doing, I mean, we're able to keep up now. How much are we using First State now for anything?
Right. Today, not, because we're also in the process. Again, we're fine in the field, right? If we get overwhelmed in the field, because that goes in waves, we can bring in First State. On the plan review side, we've done training sessions with them, and we're doing another training session to get them used to MGO. So there's been a lag in their use in doing plan review for us, but we'll still be using them.
So does MGO help speed up the process of doing a plan review?
Not plan review specifically. MGO speeds up the process as a whole.
Okay.
Most definitely.
All right, so over the last 2 years, why have we not been able to, what reasons for not filling the Inspector 3, 2, or even the Inspector 1 position?
We had originally, again, when Levy Court reclassified the positions a couple of years ago, we advertised for the 3, and the 3 has all qualifications. And that's incredibly difficult to recruit for. And then we got approval this past summer to advertise for a 1. That was open for a few weeks. We were not able to find somebody, and then we just went the contractor route.
So do you see any changes that we've talked about earlier about hiring practices that will help find additional candidates for the Inspector 1?
I think there's potential. I think, and I'm, anxious to talk to Alan about it. I think maybe changing up the job description to clarify what the roles are could be helpful. And we talked about this a few weeks ago. It is very, very difficult when the economy is good, when the real estate market is good, to hire in I&E because the private sector is just too good. We can't compete. So that's just a struggle of the market.
At this point in time, I'm in favor of keeping it in-house and keeping the person. But, I mean, to Mr. Petitamage's point, I still would like to have some funds sitting around to help if we get into this situation again, whether it's a breakout of some variation of COVID or everybody wins a trip and they all want to go on vacation or something so that it's sitting there. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And my preference is always to keep the job in-house so that you do have those folks that can fill in other positions. But when you can't hire because you don't find somebody to meet the qualifications, then you have to outsource.
What I would like, before this decision is made, because I am as confident as I've ever been about a decision up here, that this is a mistake. What I would like, and I can get the numbers, I have them in a text, the volume of plan reviews and inspections that were done to help us to catch up, and the effectiveness of that relationship, and using the scenario that when we cool down or catch up, we have some good folks in there that we've set them up with NGO, we've set them up with vehicles to take home now. They can handle this. They're good at it. That's the relationship I'd like to keep. But if you want to add more spending to the budget, you go right ahead, because that's what you're doing. I'll leave that up to you to decide, but I would ask that at a minimum, we generate the data that's been produced. And that was a squirrely answer that you got about who we had before. Let's stay specific. From the time that we implemented this change and hired First Aid, could have been the other group, doesn't matter. We have been full-on inspections and plans reviews. That's what the question you asked. That's what you wanted to know, and that's the answer that I'd like you to have in some data, real data. I'm going over the top right now. Hopefully not too emotional, but a little bit, because I think we're making the wrong decision. At the end of the day, it is what it is. So if we want to move on, we can move on. Again, I just would ask that you get a look at some data over the last 2 months. It's not my committee, right? I guess it is, but not really. So I don't want to give the mic to anybody. Take the mic there, Commissioner Howe.
It really would be the Finance Committee, since we're in budget review. So.
I have a quick question for Mr. Petimaj. I like to keep it in-house too, but at the same time, I like to have a caveat where if we needed to have funds to get help, to get, First Aid or whoever we're doing to go out and help out. So I see that as a win-win for the county and keeping things moving and not letting the staff get overworked if we get bogged down. So my present preference would be keep it in-house, but have funds set up to help out if we need it.
Well, you said it, we need funds.
But I haven't heard a dollar amount yet. That's why I'm bringing it up too. How much were we talking about?
Well, I think our first state, it had an upset of 50,000, I think. And prior to that, with the other organization, we spent 20-some thousand, 25,000. We went up to our limit, and then we went out with an RFP, and I believe Ms. Kiefer, is our upset with the contract 50, our limit? It was in the 50s.
So your recommendation would be about $50,000 set aside then? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, it's in that order. Yeah.
We have $200,000 uncommitted from your budget. Can we just take it from that and set it aside as a savings for that?
I'm sorry, you lost me on that.
I saw in the thing we had $200,000 uncommitted from your budget. Did I read that wrong?
That was just open space funding that has been uncommitted.
Committed money, right, 200,000.
Right, but it's committed, it's open space money, it's just that the people have not come forward with the state, and they'll be having another draw in May and bringing it forward. So it's set aside for a specific thing. I do want to say that the money that they're using right now, this year, is for, the position was funded in 2021, so the money that they've used so far has been the funding from that position. So it hasn't, we didn't fund the contractual services in 2021. We're using the position funding. So if you keep the position, you're going to have to increase the budget even more, because you're going to have to fund the position, and currently the position is not funded in this proposed budget. And then you'll also have to add whatever amount you guys decide as a contingency in case they get too busy.
Well, I'd be in favor of keeping the position and developing a contingency to draw from. And then if we don't need it, we just returns back to the pot at the end of the year. But as a timely aside, I'd just like to say that one of the things that I recommended for the retreat was a workforce analysis where we would have somebody come in and provide an objective third-party review of the work versus the workforce and give us an idea of what kind of positions we need, what kind of structure. That's different from a compensation study. It tells us, this is how much you need to do. These are the numbers of people that you need to do it. And so something like that would be handy now, so we could take a look at that and mirror that against the workload in the planning department and every other department. All right, thanks.
Are we ready to move on? So we did get an estimated increase in our medical insurance this year from Delaware Valley Health Trust. And the first look is 4.176% increase. That would increase the general fund $152,600, and the sewer fund will increase by $56,700. And I can tell you that is the lowest increase that since I've been doing budgets since 2008. And this is the pension, which we do not have the recommended numbers, but our contribution in 2021 was $4.1 million. Do you know anything about the pension?
Alan doesn't know. Do you have anything on that, Alan?
Okay. Back that up for a second. And Mr. Quayla, would you suggest the scary thing about that is that's COVID related and not going to the doctors? Possibly. Anyway, moving on.
The reason why it's so low this year is also because we've received a credit for the last couple of years we've been in the trust, and so this is going towards our credit.
How much of the credit did we get? That's a good thing. That's what we're looking forward to.
Correct.
Do you know how much it was, the credit?
I do not know the answer to that.
All right.
No, Alan.
How much was the credit?
The credit was applied to all the members, and I think it was $10 million.
Okay. We're the big dog, didn't we get a lot?
So OPEB, the recommended contribution is $2.5 million, which is a reduction of $221,000 over fiscal year 2021. However, the pension committee wants to make the commissioners aware that the contribution for 2023 will likely be $200,000 higher. I think that they might be recommending to keep it at the last year's budget. So currently built into the budget is last year's contribution of $2.7 million. The general fund's portion of that is $1.9 million. Currently built into the budget is $2,094,000. And the sewer fund is $603,000, and there's $641,000 built into the budget. The consumer price index is 1.6%. The cost of 1% is $165,000. And 2% is $330,000. Of that, the general fund is $126,700 and $253,400. The sewer fund is $38,400 and $76,800. And below, I put what the cost would be for 1.6 General fund, it's 264,200, and sewer fund would be 61,500. And just as a note, the 2% step is built into the budget, and the cost of that, the general fund is 209,900, and sewer fund is 63,200. And the last slide is just to show the different personnel expenditures by department. I know that there's all discussions about benefits and salaries and everything. As you see, the public safety is almost 43% of our expenditures for personnel. So we have to keep them. Is there any other questions?
If I may, Debbie, back on the PPAs, not trying to saw sawdust here or anything, but
Which one?
on the PPAs in general.
The first one?
The list that were concurred with are built into the budget, correct?
Yes, it's on the bottom line.
Yes, but the paramedics were not built into the budget
correct.
yet. And I want to make sure everyone understands that almost $500,000 cost is not reflected in this budget. So if you want to do those paramedics this year, then we need to do some things to make it work. And just wanted to make sure everyone understood that. The others were built into the budget cost.
What is the next? Sorry, Jeff, go ahead. Here's
Well,
probably more
I was just going to follow right up on that. The 5 positions are related to the decision to expand into Westover, set up the new paramedic station out there. Is that a true statement?
I'd say they're related to that, and Colin's here, and he may want to address it. They're related to that, obviously. But when, my understanding, when we embarked on that project, there was no commitment to fully staff that facility from day one. And I believe we had some discussions about initially having it as a power unit station that would eventually evolve into, at some point in time, a fully 24 hours operation there. Now that focus may have changed over time, but that was my understanding when we first started talking about that station. And we do have the power unit that is up during part of the, most of the day, but not 24 hours. But Colin can address it from an operations standpoint, but that was my understanding. It wasn't a out of the gate commitment.
Can do as one commissioner, right? To state clearly that I need the second budget meeting. I assume we plan on meeting anyway. To formally state what I am for and what I am not in favor of. So that's what I want to make clear. Because I want to, well, with that said, though, I think that anybody, this is me personally, right? Anybody that showed up tonight to kind of speak in favor of whatever it is they wanted to speak in favor of, I don't want them to think I didn't want to hear them. I certainly would welcome hearing them tonight. I just don't want to weigh in on it, me personally, tonight. Thanks.
Colin, can you address what we just talked about, please?
So the reason that we developed the station for Southwest is that we identified in our data trends that we were trending downwards. We weren't meeting the covenants of 332, House Bill 332 for response time goals. So, the idea to develop the substation emerged, and the challenge with just putting a power unit, which is up 12 hours a day, is you're saying, well, for this 12 hours a day, people are going to be served well, and for the other 12 hours a day, people perhaps could be underserved in response time. The other challenges along with that, I think the fire service is going to get used to our paramedics responding out there. They're going to want them out there 24/7. And operationally, our plan is to redistrict Dover, we currently have 1 unit, 2 units in the daytime to manage the surge that occurs typically in the daytime. And, to move, and moving the power unit out there is sound. That's the way to go. But to have a set of operational instructions for a 911 center for 12 hours a day, and then a different set for nighttime is a bit of a challenge too. So, my sense is that, if you want to be honest, 12 hours a day, people are going to be served well, and the other 12 hours are not going to get as quick a response from the paramedics. Operationally, it's a challenge too, because we have a set of operating instructions for 12 hours a day, and for the other 12 hours, we're back to the old way of doing business. But Mr. Pedramont is right, though. We initially started this. The idea was to develop and put the power unit out there, and I know the comments were made at the time that at some juncture, the public is going to get used to us being there. The fire service is going to get used to us being there. I'm just putting these other things out there because the commissioners may very well hear about them at some juncture from their constituents. So.
Aren't you struggling now to even hire people?
So all three counties are, which may be a good reason to start now. All 3 counties are struggling. Newcastle, for example, they pay people to go to school, and they contract them to the county. In Kent County and Sussex County, we fight for the 8 or 10 people that might graduate from Delaware Technical and Community College. And we do all the recruiting that we can, off of social media. We visit college institutions. We have folks that we know we've gotten good medics from before. We're just, it's a dry field. It's not for everybody to get into this kind of work. And we only have one institution putting out paramedics in the state of Delaware, and that's Delaware Tech. And we like their students because they're taught the Delaware way. Delaware is an aggressive state medically, so if you want to practice medicine, this is the place to be. But some of our out-of-state candidates that we get, they get lonely. They get lonely. They want to go back home, and they'll be here for a while, and then they'll go back from wherever they came. Not all of them, but some of them do. But it is a challenge, which lends a thought in my mind that maybe we should start that process now. We have currently, I think, 4 open field positions. We're going to have 5 open field positions very soon with some promotions that we have going on in the department. That's one shift. So it's a challenge. But we do, but it's.
If I may, just because we're early in the budget discussions, and I'll be the first one to bring this up. Given that we need 5 positions, given that we're making a capital investment in that part of town, that's not going to go away. I think we have the authority to create a public safety tax that may help offset the cost of those 5 positions, and then maybe that's something we need to consider. Since it would be a targeted tax, I think it would be a tax we could explain, and I think we could tie it to those 5 positions to the new station and help defray the cost of doing that. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And the last thing I'll say tonight at 10:23 is, what I heard tonight was we're having a hard time filling positions. We have vacant positions. We're not getting applicants for positions that we have. So that's in the back of my mind as we look at COLAs, benefits, step increases, and all of those things that cost money. But when we choose not to invest in those things, we see a cost on the other end. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
What's the issue of staffing is we have these vacant positions. We have to fill them. So we're paying overtime, and in some instances, in all instances, the double for paramedics is 24-hour shift, and a triple is at least 36. And it's unhealthy, quite frankly. I think 24 hours is unhealthy, quite frankly. But because you do get fatigued, but it's important for us to begin that process, and we're continually in the process of looking for paramedics. National campaigns that we've observed what the other two counties have done. I don't think they've been very successful with national, the big $5,000 and $6,000 ads in trade journals and things like that. The only thing that seems to work is Delaware Tech for us. The occasional folks we can get out of state, and what Newcastle County is doing. I'm not suggesting we do that, but their shortage is proportionate to air shortage. They have more people up there. They have more medics. We have less people. We have less medics, but the problem's the same in each county. And they pay people to go to school. They hire them. It's like the police academy would do. You pay them a salary, and then when they're done, they work for you. That's extreme, but it's their way of managing the problem. They've been doing that for several years now. So.
If I could just comment also, it's a good discussion to have because this is a significant boost in cost, and I'm sure everyone understands that public safety is our largest cost center. It's a necessary cost center, but it's our largest, and it's a growing one. Every year you can see it's trending up. Not any fault of Colin Faulkner or his staff. It's just the nature of what they do and the demand. But it is a cost that goes up. And when we first started this, we were focusing on why are we pulling so much out of reserves? And then here's another almost $500,000 from a cost center that doesn't generate revenue. Okay, so we need to be thinking along the lines that Commissioner Hall just talked about. If we're going to continue this trend in public safety, I believe at some point you're going to have to face it and say we need to generate some revenue to support this.
Mr. Pettit,
that's a tough one to say, I know, but and not popular, but that's the reality. I see it. I'm sorry.
It was presented to us that we maybe or maybe do not have the authority to raise a public safety tax. I was approached by a group a month ago, in fact, just a few. I would support the conversation, certainly. There's no reason not to. I started here a while back. The budget less than 10 years ago maybe was about 25% in its totality as far as public safety. It's now it's closing in on half. And so my statement to you, Chief Faulkner, I've supported those budgets. I've been behind you. What I would suggest and ask, and again, why I'm not weighing in tonight, that I'd like to budget this, that I'd like to come up with a way where we can do this over a couple years to afford it rather than just put it into the budget. I think we can. I think that a power unit will be effective out there. I think that you have the ability with your other members to backfill and be effective as you are right this minute. You are effective, highly effective. Perfect? No, it's not perfect, but it's manageable, allowing us to manage the budget. Does that mean I won't support it if it gets to us next week, whenever we have our second meeting? I don't know, but I laid it out there for you, right? It does me no good, because I can certainly know there's probably a few paramedics on the line aren't going to like hearing that, but
Chief,
somebody has to say it.
Chief, you're 4 behind and you're 5 more. How long would it realistically take you to get 9 positions?
Oh, it could take up to a year. I mean, to be honest with you, be up to a year. A lot of it depends on Delaware Tech, and we're active. I mean, we're actively recruiting those students now. There's a crop of students that's supposed to, we may be lucky, but we're not the only game in town. And but we are actively recruiting from Delaware Tech right now. That's their problem. It's not like nursing school. Nursing schools all over the place. We don't have paramedic schools all over the place. It's a specialty, and so Delaware Tech is it for us. And we continue our out of state push, to bring folks in, particularly in the tri-state area, because at least it's close to home for most folks. It could, the way it's going, it could take up to a full year to bring that kind of staff in. Because once we get them, we just can't put them to work. We have to put them through an FTO, field training officer program, and some are not successful in that process, and then we have to start all over again. We have a couple we're looking at right now that'll help, unclog the pipe a little bit. So we're hopeful for the 2 that we're looking at, but it remains to be seen until we actually see them in action and put them through our FTO process. Because we're not going to compromise standards in the departments.
So we're competing with the other 2 counties. How's our salaries compared to theirs?
Well, Newcastle always pays more. And Sussex, maybe Mr. Quiella can weigh in. I mean, I know we've looked at this in years past, but I want to say that we're probably in line to, I don't know, to be honest with you, I have to find out. I think we're closer in line to Sussex and Newcastle County, but Newcastle's more urban, and through my whole history in this field, they've always paid more than Kent County.
So the overtime we're paying because we're down 4 people?
We pay, there's 2 sets of overtime. One of the overtime figures that we pay is because of the shift that they work. They don't work 40-hour weeks. They work 2 10s and 2 14s. And so that's scheduled overtime. And then we have the unscheduled overtime. That's what causes us the most concern. And I know every single time a call goes out because I get a text. And I know what happens, and we typically get that, to just convey the severity of the problem. If we get to the nth hour, it goes out as a mandatory hold. That means if you're working in Smyrna, you may not be going home. And we work this out. Of course, we have organized labor. We have a union group, and we go down the list to see who's going to get held. But it's I was a practitioner for 25 years. I'm going to tell you, 24 hours is just a long time. It really is. So it's a.
So how much of that second type of overtime held overtime, not scheduled, held over? How much do we spend for that a year?
Unscheduled overtime? I think finance has a figure. I would say it's probably upwards of $300,000-$400,000. Wouldn't you say, Susan?
I'd have to separate it out.
Yeah, we'd have to.
It all goes to the same pot.
Yeah.
So if you hired 5 additional plus the 4 that you need, that would dramatically cut down on the overtime, the unscheduled?
It would definitely cut down if we're up to staff, because we have 2 floats per work group because the work groups are so large now. And but if we have enough staff to cover the unscheduled overtime, then we wouldn't have any unscheduled overtime.
But hiring the 5 new ones have nothing to do with that.
Exactly.
You're talking about filling the other 4 that you have.
Right, the other 4. But we see the problem is though, we try not to schedule. We try not to incur overtime on the work group. So obviously we don't let 4 people off on the same night. Now, sometimes we'll let folks off on vacation. You know, we have 2 floats per each work group. And if they become committed and someone calls in sick, well, then there you go. We have overtime. And you know, the other challenge in our department too is they're paramedics, for lack of a better way to say it. Sometimes on the job they break. You know, the job is sometimes very. It requires a lot of physical prowess, and you know, you're working in conditions that are unpleasant, and you get injured. And sometimes their folks are out for a couple of 3 months, you know, on workers' comp. And it's common in all public safety fields, no matter what your what your badge says. But we can certainly cut down. To me, it's, you know, it's one thing to cut down on it and save money, but my biggest concern is paramedics working excessively long hours. I don't think the interns even do that anymore for med school. We work longer than they do, I'm pretty sure. And we work some of these doubles and triples. So.
Any other questions?
I just want to make one statement about Sussex County. Colin is correct that the salary is pretty even to ours. I think it's just a couple $100 under. But the thing that they get is they're allowed to retire in, I think, like 25 years or something. And their benefits, they only pay, I believe their health insurance is paid 100% by the county. So even though we're equal with the salaries, we're definitely not equal with the benefits.
Thank you. Mr. Angel.
Mr. President, I've been trying to think back when Mr. Hall brought up public safety tax, and it kind of juggled my mind that we had a discussion about that years ago. And it was also, I believe, was when Mr. Broad was a commissioner, and I brought it up because I was trying to bring up helping the fire companies and the ambulance and our police with Colin Faulkner at a meeting where we could do a public safety tax like a library tax, is what I think I said. Plus, I also said that insurance is, you know, taking people to the hospital, it costs money. Why couldn't we use that? And then I found out there's a law we can't do that. But why can't we change the law? Because ambulance and paramedics vehicles need maintenance, they need upkeep, as well as we need staff. And I think that's what I said. Harold, do you remember that? Okay, I mean, I've been sitting here, I know, I feel like I'm a historian now, but it just seems like it takes a while for things to come back around. And I agree with Mr. Hall wholeheartedly, and I'm not trying to steal his thunder, but the public safety tax is a way to help our paramedics because we are growing and we are getting bigger, and there's only so much money. But I also like to say that our ambulance service and our fire service could also benefit in the same thing, as I said back then.
The ambulance service is, because they can bill insurance companies. What they're billing for is typically the ambulance use and oxygen and things of that nature. We're not allowed to bill insurance companies at all for what we do. So you're right. I mean, we don't produce any revenue, so we have to have the revenue somehow. And, you know, I mean, as a citizen, I would certainly support that. Definitely as a director.
I think we started, this was brought up when we were, I don't know, back in around 2010, I think, or maybe a little bit before, when we were starting to look at raising the amount of money that we give to the fire companies instead of what we've been giving them for 20-some years or better. And that was one of the things that we looked at, one of the ways we looked at it in order to be able to do it, or one of the things that was also brought up by the committee that reviewed it to make the recommendation to us. And so, yeah, it has been brought up several times in the past that I recall. Ms. Maston.
I mean, as painful it is for taxes for anybody, I myself don't like taxes, but I can tell you I met with 4 fire companies, and I know it's not a topic here, but I met with 4 fire companies last Monday night, and one of them, Lipstick, they have their ambulance. They don't even make enough money to fund the ambulance. It's coming out of their operating. And I can tell you that both Smyrna, Clayton, Cheswell, and Lipstick brought up the topic about a public safety tax as to how we're gonna be able to get the fire companies to stay in existence. Because even though the county's giving, I think it's $1 million this year to them, it's not near enough for what the fire companies need. So, you know, it's the same problem the paramedics have. The fire companies are all facing it.
Yeah, when the fire departments migrated towards, the volumes are up, fire suppression's down. So all your activity is in, not all of it, but most of the activity is in emergency medical services. And now folks work. You know, back when I was young, you know, we could even leave school to respond to calls. Now they're hiring paid personnel. Once they started hiring paid personnel to run their ambulances, their costs escalated. And it is difficult for them to, you know, to maintain their operational platform based on limited income. It's very, especially if you have low volumes. It doesn't make you any less responsible whether you get, you know, 300 calls a year or 3,000 calls a year. Your responsibility is the same. And the challenges they have is if they didn't have to worry about paying personnel, which is always your highest cost, they'd be fine. You know, if they could just rely on volunteers to do it, they probably would be fine, but that's not the reality now. The reality is they need paid personnel to run their ambulances.
The other thing with what you're saying, both Cheswell and Lipstick are paying people to staff the firehouse as best they can. And in fact, what they're learning now is the average age to do a recruit, where typically when you were in school was 16, the age now is down to 12, which means when you bring children into the fire service to train them as firefighters, a lot changes around the firehouse in terms of whether it be language, behaviors, et cetera. But that's what they're finding. The other thing that I learned too is that the state of Maryland has classes. They have a pathway in their high schools for fire service as well as EMTs. I know it's not a paramedic, but the state of Maryland is offering that in order to encourage students to go into firefighting, plus the income tax savings or the earned credit, I forget exactly what it's called. I guess if you're an active member, the state of Delaware is $400 because the $500 didn't go through this year because it hadn't been approved. But the state of Maryland's offering for 2021 $5,000 a year tax credit. So the state of Delaware's got a long way to go. But these are things that we're going to have to address here at a county level.
I know that the Polytech at one point, I'm not sure that they do it anymore, but they had an EMT training program. Some of my staff assisted with that program, and I haven't heard anything out of that in quite some while. So they may have lost interest in it. But
Well, my understanding is it doesn't exist now.
I'm sorry, say again?
My understanding of Polytech, it doesn't exist now.
Okay, that's probably, yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
Okay, thank you.
Debbie, you have more?
No, that was it.
Okay.
So all these items, open items, will be brought back next Tuesday.
Okay, so we all have homework, things to think about. Mr. Fatimaj, you have anything further to add?
No, Mr. President, I think that concludes the workshop. If commissioners are through at this point, thank you.
Executive session.
All right, we're adjourned, and are we having leadership tomorrow?
I want to.
Night, everyone. Thank you for staying late.
See you, Mike. See you, Greg.